Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. نوينا التعلم والتعليم والتذكر والتذكير والنفع والانتفاع والإفادة والاستفادة والحث على التمسك بكتاب الله والسنة رسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم والدعاء إلى الهدى والدلالة على الخير ابتغاء مرضات الله ووجهه وقربه وثوابه. اللهم افتح علينا بحكمتك وانشر علينا برحمتك يا ذا الجلال والإكرام. يا عليم علمنا من علمك ما ترضى به عنا ولا تؤاخذنا بما تعلمه منا. يا حليم خلقنا بخلق الحلم وحققنا بحقائق العلم. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. I want to thank you for coming, and I'm honored by your presence. We will have a fairly good amount of time together today, and this time is for you. And for that reason, I want you to feel free to ask questions. I prefer that the questions that you ask be directly relevant to what we say. If I use a word that you don't understand, then you feel free to ask about that, and don't be embarrassed. What we're talking about is a different way of looking at the world. And it is a way of looking at the world which is unfamiliar to most human beings today, whether they are Muslims or non-Muslims. It is what we call the traditional Muslim world view, but very few people have inherited it. And very few people know what it is or how to use it. And therefore, we don't want to go too fast. We don't want to say too many things. We want to be able, to walk together on this path. And that means that you need to tell me any questions that you have. And then we can work that out. And you'll be very certain that any questions you have, any perplexities you have, you're not the only one. So if you ask a question, someone else will also be very thankful for that. Beauty, the splendor of truth. Beauty, the splendor of truth. What does that mean? Beauty, the splendor of truth. What does that mean? And if anybody would like to venture an answer, then you're most welcome to do that. And we might express that in a contrary way. Ugliness, the brand of falsehood. Ugliness, the brand of falsehood. When we look at traditional Islamic societies, wherever they were beautiful. Our cities were garden cities. Our cities could provide all the food the people needed. That was one of the first requirements of an Islamic city. It had to be able to provide all the water and food that its people needed. It could not be dependent on the outside. It had to be self-sufficient. And that was an amazing principle. Okay? And it meant that all of our cities, Cairo, Damascus, Lahore, wherever they were beautiful cities. And everything we produced was beautiful. Even our dishes, even our clothing, our carpets. And that wasn't just true in the cities. If you were to go to a simple village, let's say a Thai Muslim village in the sea, you would see that the mosques they made from bamboo and everything they made was absolutely beautiful. And this is not something that was unique to us alone. It was something typical of what we can call people with tradition. If you looked at the First Nations of Canada and the United States, the so-called Indians, we call them here Native Americans, everything they did was beautiful too. Everything they did, spectacularly beautiful. Okay, so why? What was the reason for that? If you went into a Tawarik village, do we have any Bosnians here? You know, Bosnia was so beautiful as an expression of Islamic agricultural culture in Europe that Europeans, had it not been destroyed, would have been in awe of it. This is what we did everywhere we went. If you went into the southern Sahara Desert and were a guest of the Tawarik, where the men wear veils, you'd see that everything they make too is incredibly beautiful. A Tawarik rug or carpet, if you were to bring it to New York City, you could sell it for a fortune, probably in 15 minutes. So what is the reason for that? And so this is what we want to talk about today. Beauty is the splendor of truth. And the beauty of Islamic civilization, that it was the splendor of the truth that civilization embodied. Wherever it went, from China to Java, Central Asia, Africa, wherever it went. And we have to understand this. And we have to grasp it. And we have to live it. And we have to revive it. And if we are able to do that, then we become creators of civilization again. And this is one of our biggest tasks of all, because we live in a time when the whole world needs civilization. Even this wonderful country. It needs civilization. It needs to be rooted in reality. It needs to have access to beauty. And this is a desperate need at this time, both in the West and in the Muslim world. And we don't want to belittle any of our brothers and sisters or any of our great scholars in the Muslim world. They do the best they can do. But one of the amazing things of this time is that there's no question about our sincerity. But one of the amazing things about this time is that we have come into the modern era with our spiritual apparatus intact. And nobody else has done that. That is an amazing sign. You can still go to Mecca. You can still go to Medina. You can still go, well, Jerusalem's still there. We pray essentially in the way that our Prophet prayed, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We fast essentially in the way that our Prophet fasted. We pay zakat, we give charity, we do umrah, we make hajj. So this we have inherited, and of course we've inherited all the books of the past as well. We have a huge corpus of manuscripts, not even 10% of which has even really been looked at, much less to have been published. Okay, so we pray very much in the outward form of the way the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba prayed. But our minds are very different. Our worldview is very different. And often it's difficult for us to understand the way that the great men and women of Islam who lived hundreds of years ago talked about the world or lived in the world. Okay, and so what's very important for us is to be able to understand them. And that's not just a linguistic problem that, well, we don't use this word today. Okay, so this is, okay, sorry about that. Sorry about that. And so beauty is the splendor of truth. That means that beauty has ontological roots. Beauty has ontological roots. That's a big word, ontological. And what does that mean? This is a place where does anybody have an answer? Beauty has ontological roots. Who wants to say what they understood from that? I know that Nuri knows that already. Yes?
I think ontology is the study of being. So
Mm-hmm.
that beauty has ontological roots would probably mean that it is something that came to the mind.
Please come in. Please come in. Repeat what you said, please.
And to say that beauty is ontological quality is probably to say that it's something that came to the mind and more than just an existential value.
Okay, that's very good that you give me that feedback. So, ontology pertains to the nature of being. It is the study of being. And this is not too loud, it doesn't echo. Okay, what did you want to say? The brother who raised his hand? Well, that's all very good. So, we're not too far. We're on the track. But what I mean to say by that is that beauty is related to the very nature of reality. Beauty is related to the very nature of existence, of being. Okay, that's what beauty is the splendor of truth. That's what that means. And inshallah, we will talk about this a lot. And hopefully it will become perfectly familiar to you. Okay, so let's, and again, whether the word ontological is the best word we should use here, it might be confusing, but that's what I mean by that. That beauty has metaphysical roots. Beauty has roots that pertain to the ultimate principles that underlie reality. Okay? Beauty is related to the ultimate principles that underlie reality. Beauty is central to the nature of reality when properly perceived. Beauty and true knowledge go hand in hand. And they have another companion, which is virtue, goodness. Okay, now when you talk about this, you're formulating something which was at the very essence of the way Muslims understood the world traditionally. Okay, God is the haqq. He is the real. He is the ultimately real one. And the closer you come to God, the more real you become. And the more that the things that we do are integrated into the belief in God, the witnessing of God, then the more real we become. Okay? When we know the truth will set you free. The truth must transform you. It must set you free. If the truth doesn't transform you, then you don't have it. You may have memorized the right words, but they are not, you haven't perceived them in your heart. You cannot perceive the truth and not be overtaken and conquered by the truth. And when that happens, and you perceive the truth, and you're transformed by the truth, you become very real. The closer you get to God, the more real you become. The more that you see illusion for illusion, and delusion for delusion, and you see truth for truth. And then you become internally beautiful. Internally beautiful. God is beautiful, and He loves beauty. Beauty is the splendor of truth. God is beautiful. Inna Allaha jameel, yuhibbul jamal. That is sahih. God is beautiful, and He loves beauty. And always in language, we have things like mafhum al-mukhalafa. What you understand from the contrary point of view, which is not spoken. God does not love ugliness. And this is one of the reasons why Muslims were so beautiful, because they knew that God loves beauty. And Muslims tended to be extremely skilled laborers, because our societies were dominated by guilds, which we call asnaf, by guilds. The medieval Europeans also had guilds. It's said that that's one of the things they brought home from the Crusades. But the men and women of the guilds were extremely skilled, whether they were leather workers, gold workers, metal, silver workers, stone cutters, tanners, weavers, medicine makers, or whatever they were. They were extremely skilled. They were very proud of what they did. How could they build these mosques they built? You know, which many of you have seen yourselves. Mosques that, like the great mosque of Sinan in Edirne in Turkey, which is one of the most beautiful pieces of the glorification of God on earth. You know, or like Sultan Hassan. You can't go in there and not be amazed. Okay, so God loves beauty. God is beauty. And therefore, if you come close to the real, will you not become beautiful? The microphone agrees. Right? The microphone agrees, but we'll ask, please don't comment. All right? And what is that inner beauty? That goodness, virtue, husnul khuluq, husnul khuluq. And these things go together. Today we often think of intelligence as something that has nothing to do with character. You can be a really good person and solve mathematical problems, and you can be a dissolute person, just one of the miserable human beings of the earth. Doesn't know how to treat his wife right or his children right. You can still solve the same mathematical question. Okay, but for us in Islamic civilization, and this is again true of traditional civilizations in general, intelligence is not problem solving. You know, we tip our hats to the engineers, but this is very important. Intelligence is not simply the ability to identify quantifiable problems and then solve them. No, it's not. Intellect can only grow in the soil of virtue, of goodness. This is extremely important. Extremely important. And of course, intellect, al-aql, is okay?
Maybe we'll go back to the other.
Yeah, we do whatever we have to do. You have to hear. You have to be able to hear. If you want to hook that up to my ear, we can do it.
I think it's good.
Okay, let's do it. Right?
So sorry, I'm sorry.
Inshallah.
This one.
Okay. There we go. Okay, Bismillah. Is that better?
Yeah.
Maybe it's a little bit loud. Okay. How's that? Is that good? Okay. Now, were you able to follow up to this point? We don't have to start all over? And then let's just remove this. So, when you know the truth will set you free. It will transform you. And you will become a good person. Okay? And you become internally beautiful. Because God is beautiful. And that is what we call goodness, virtue, good character, husnul khuluq. And when you become internally beautiful, in the way you think, the way you watch your heart, then what comes from you will be beautiful. What comes from you will be graceful. What comes from you will be thoughtful. And especially if you were to be an architect or a designer or even a farmer, that what you do will also be done with an eye to beauty, because beauty is harmony. Okay, so this is what we're talking about then. Okay, does anyone want to ask a question? Yes?
Can you perhaps elaborate on why the discussion on reality and truth is being framed for beauty?
What do you mean?
So there's an emphasis on the discussion regarding beauty and what
Mhm.
beauty is, and that beauty is truth and reality,
Mhm.
God himself. Why is that an important framing of the discussion
Mhm.
of truth and reality?
Okay, so why is that important? It's not arbitrary. Okay, this is very important, that beauty is not arbitrary. God is beautiful. God loves beauty. So if you have the truth, then, and God is the ultimate manifestation of that truth,
then as you approach the real, you also approach the beautiful. And you could call it the majestic as well. God is Al-Jamil as well as Al-Jalil. And in fact, in some of the transmissions of the Asma al-Husna, the most beautiful names of God, He is called Al-Jalil al-Jamil. So these two go together. So it could be majesty and beauty, but these are central qualities that pertain to the attributes of God and that pertain also to reality itself. And when you take virtue, when virtue comes into your heart, that is called internal beauty. Okay, and we talk about ihsan. You see, ihsan, which is the epitome of the religion. And we'll come to that in a minute. And then, in your ihsan, you're doing beauty. You're making beauty. Then that takes in the whole society. So let's talk about this a little bit more. Beauty then has ontological roots. Beauty has metaphysical roots. Beauty is central to the nature of reality when properly perceived. Excuse me. Beauty and true knowledge go hand in hand. And as we said before, ugliness is the mark, what did we say? The brand of falsehood. Modernity is a very complex phenomenon, and it's extremely important for us to understand what it means and how it developed. Okay, but modernity, from the time of its inception, by its own admission, has a problem with ugliness. Ugly industrial cities, slums. And this has to do with many things: capitalism, the creation of new divisions of labor, especially unskilled. Capitalism loves the unskilled laborer because he can't say anything, or she can't say anything. We didn't like, we welcome laborers, but in the Muslim world, labor is skilled labor. And it takes great pride in that. And all of this goes back to that self-sufficiency that we talked about in the city. Okay? So, beauty and true knowledge, along with virtue, they go hand in hand. And as we said, this is an ontological reality. In other words, it's not an ideology. And if you get it right, it will produce. And this means also that if you have the truth, then expect creativity to come. And Muslims have been remarkably creative people. Remarkably creative people. When Islam spread in Java, which is one of the great miracles of Islamic history, Java was a Hindu-Buddhist rice civilization that had a thoroughgoing metaphysics which was expressed in their art. Okay? And when Islam spreads in Java and rice peasants begin to become Muslims, and they're going to come to the mosque, well, the mosque will be usually a marble floor because of the fact that you can't put down carpets, you can't put down mats, it's too humid. People can bring in prayer rugs if they want, but it will be a marble floor. And the peasants coming out of the rice field many days of the year, and his or her feet are going to be very muddy. So how are you going to keep them from tracking up the mosque? You're going to put guards at the door? They probably won't come back. You have to be polite in Javanese society. So again, creatively, we solve that problem with beauty. And so when you go to the wudu, you have to walk through water. A little pool of water. And you're going to do wudu. So your feet are probably pretty clean. And then when you come to the mosque to walk in, you have to walk through a bigger pool of water that goes around the whole mosque. So that means very few people will track mud into the mosque. And now, the water that goes around the wudu fountain or around the mosque, it's going to be muddy. And that could mean you get mosquitoes and you get larvae there. And so they put big fish, carp, in the water. They eat the larvae, and you can eat the fish. Yes? Mm-hmm. Okay, let's just deal with that first. What is the question?
The question is that human attributes like beauty. So, it's okay now? Okay. So, my question is that beauty and ugliness and all these, they are attributes of humanity or the human society. So you're trying to link these attributes to define Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So is it in the same context, or are you trying to attribute Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a different context?
Did you understand?
Not 100%.
Mm-hmm.
Because beauty and ugliness and all these things are to define a human.
Well,
Human society.
yeah. So, do you understand?
So
Mhm.
I have some confusion there about whether beauty is attributable to humanity.
Attributes of humanity.
Okay, so your question is beauty attributable to humans? Is that it? And ugliness? So that's the question. That's very good. And of course, human beings love beauty. They are attracted to beauty. And they are capable of producing beauty. And the beauty they produce will always reflect what they believe. Does that make sense to you? Human beings are also capable of extreme ugliness. And that ugliness they produce will also reflect what they believe or disbelieve. Okay? If you believe the truth, and the truth is related to God, that's a principial truth, and God is beautiful, then it comes from the top down. It doesn't go from the bottom up. So, the beauty of traditional Islamic societies had an indirect didactic role. Had an indirect didactic role. What does didactic mean? Yes. Yes. Teaching. See, this is very important. The beauty of traditional Islamic societies, like a great mosque, it had an indirect didactic role. It was beauty manifest, but a beauty that reflected the truth that is at the very core of reality. Okay? So that beauty fought on your behalf. This is very, very important, that when you create a society in which beauty becomes the norm, as it was in many traditional Muslim societies, and of course is it that way today in Muslim societies. Today, Muslim societies are often, but not always, the ugliest societies on earth, the most poorly organized on earth, the most polluted on earth. Okay, we are nothing today like we were in the past. Cairo was one of the wonders of the world, but today it's not. So, but when beauty is there, the splendor of truth, then it thinks on your behalf. It furnishes you with a criterion of truth. And this is very, very important, because all of these things we believe in, these ultimate realities that are based in the nature of reality, they're actually very profound. They're immense. But the beauty that takes in the society, it manifests them to people. It attracts people to those ideas. And it thinks on their behalf. Or you could say it enables them to think. And it enables them to grow. And it enables them to embrace the realities that we believe in. Okay, so that's just a beginning. Now, where do we go from there? Let's just review some of the things that we've said. The human being is capable of perfection. Okay, again, this is something that some Muslims today would be startled by. But traditionally, the purpose of religion, of course, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. Okay? I did not create the spirits and the human beings, but that they worship me. Okay, so we were created to worship God. And we cannot be happy unless we worship God. Okay, that's where our happiness lies. Okay, so this is the first purpose. And Ibn Abbas, he says that the verse means, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْرِفُونَ. I did not create the jinn and the human beings, but that they know me, but that they know God. What is the benefit then of the verse being in the form it's in? Why doesn't it just say that? وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْرِفُونَ. These are among the many profound subtleties of the Quran. So one of the things that you learn from that is that you will come to know God by ibadah, through humility, through submission, through being God's servant, and not, for example, through philosophical contemplation. Okay, so there are profound truths about reality that people who think, who use their intellect, can arrive at. And these pertain always to God, especially when we're using the intellect properly. But this will not be the right path. The right path must be submission. It must be obedience. It must be ibadah, worship and servitude. And from that will come the knowledge. And from that knowledge will come everything. So we are created to worship. We worship so that we know. And when we know God and we are transformed by that knowledge, imitating the Prophet ﷺ and the great companions and salaf of the Ummah, then we become better and better and better. And we strive for self-perfection. And we call this purification of the self and good character. But the human being is not only capable of this, the human being is charged with this responsibility. Okay? And that perfected human being, if you're not bothered by that word, that human being who has strived to perfect himself or herself, they are the ones who harmoniously integrate into themselves Islam, which in the hadith of Jibreel, which we'll look at in a minute, is outward obedience, the outward form of obedience, and Iman, which is sound creedal belief with understanding. Okay, not just lip service, although we will accept the lip service, but you understand that this is true and why this is true. Iman. And the Iman is what gives us access to the truth that transforms us. And then Ihsan, which is moral perfection. Ihsan, which literally means what? To be beautiful and to do beauty, to produce beauty. Okay, so this perfected human being who harmoniously integrates Islam, Iman, and Ihsan into a single organic whole has natural access to the real. That person has natural access to what is true about God, what is true about creation, what is true about human beings, what they need, what will benefit them. Okay, and about the way we interact with all of these elements. Okay, now let's look at Hadith Jibreel. So we'll go to that. This is, as you know, one of the great hadiths of our tradition. And it's said that in the corpus of hadith, Hadith Jibreel is a hadith that is like Al-Fatiha. It's called As-Sunnah. It is the foundation, the mother of the Sunnah. All of the Sunnah goes back to it, just as the Fatiha is called what? Quran, the mother of the Quran, the foundation of the Quran. Because all of the Quran goes back to Al-Fatiha. So what is the Hadith of Jibreel? This is a translation of the narration of Imam Muslim, and there are many transmissions of this hadith. They're very important to look at. So the narrator, who is Umar ibn al-Khattab, may Allah be pleased with him, he says, while we were in the presence of God's messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, a certain day, suddenly there appeared to us a man in intensely white garments and with intensely black hair. No sign of travel could be seen on him, and no one among us knew, or we could say recognized him. He came forward until he sat just in front of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and placed his knees against those of the Prophet and placed the palms of his hands on the Prophet's thighs sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Well, first of all, Medina was, we call it the city of Medina, but it wasn't a city like Boston. Medina was a collection of fortresses in a big oasis, a huge date oasis that is many, many miles squared. And it had a lot of people, had many different clans, but it wasn't that big. And everybody recognizes everybody else. You know who is a foreigner and who is not. And how do you get to Medina? Well, you walk there, you ride a donkey, you ride a mule, a horse, a camel. That's the only way you could get there. And to walk across the desert, which is very difficult, across the mountains around Medina, which are very difficult. When you get there, everybody will know you've been traveling. You want to change your clothes. You want to take a bath. You want to work on your hair. You'll be covered in dust. And you will have been perspiring. And the dust will have mixed with the perspiration. So they will know this is a traveler. And of course, their custom was to receive the traveler with great joy and to take the traveler in and to let him eat and drink. You don't even ask, who are you? Where do you come from? First, give them food, give them drink, and let them rest. They want to wash. Maybe they want to sleep. And after that, you might ask them, where do you come from? Okay, they won't do that in the beginning. You're a traveler, you come in, you have to eat, you have to drink. Please wash, be at home, rest a little bit. Maybe you need to sleep. And then after that, and where do you come from? What's your name? So they're amazed because this man comes in beautiful white garments. And there's no sign of travel on him. And nobody knows him. Nobody recognizes him. How can this be? How can this be? How can we explain that? And then the man comes up to the Prophet, and of course the man is extremely beautiful, extremely handsome. And he puts his knees next to the Prophet's knees, and he puts his hands on the Prophet's thigh. And this is part of ancient Arab culture. So we don't do that today. Today we would say, why is he doing that? But in that day, that means I have great need. That's what it means. I'm coming to you with something urgent. And so this is what you do. You get up very close. You put your knees up to his knees. You put your hands on his thighs. It means you've got to help me. What I'm asking you is very important. You've got to give me an answer. So he does that. And he said, Muhammad, tell me about Islam. And here we can write Islam with a little I, not a capital I. But Islam does mean what? It means submission. Submission. And amazingly, Islam also means to enter into peace, to enter into a state of perfection, perfect peace. But you do that through submission to God. Muhammad, tell me about Islam. God's messenger, may God extol him and grant him peace, said, Islam is that you bear witness that there is no God but God, and that Muhammad is the messenger of God, that you establish the daily prayer, that you pay the obligatory charity fully, that you fast Ramadan, make pilgrimage to the house of God if you are able to find a way to it. He said, namely the man who came to visit, you have spoken the truth. So we were amazed at him asking the Prophet and then stating that he had spoken the truth. So it only gets stranger. That he comes and he's sitting there in the posture of a student in great need, or of a beggar, or of someone who needs help. And he asks him this question, and then the Prophet answers. He said, you got it right. So, and as you know, in the end, this is all to teach us. All to teach us. But also this shows us that what is being taught is extremely important. This is your deen. That's why it's urgent. That's why he does it in this way. Then he said, again, this beautiful man with the white garments, tell me about Iman with a little I. The messenger said, faith, true belief. The messenger said that you believe in God, His angels, His books, His messengers, and the last day, and that you believe in qadr, predestination, that of it which is good and that of it which is evil. So everything that happens in the world, God decreed that to be. God is absolutely good. No qualifications. But God creates multiplicity. And multiplicity is infinite, potentially. And in multiplicity necessarily includes the creation of contradictions, such as the contradiction of evil. Okay, so we have to believe that. And again, the Prophet even repeats it, and that you believe, so that we know that the belief in God's complete control over reality is absolutely essential. And again, the wonderful guest replied, you've spoken the truth. The same thing. You've spoken the truth. So tell me about ihsan. Tell me about ihsan, moral perfection. But again, the word, as we noted before, means to be in a state of beauty, to do beauty, to be beauty, to transmit beauty. So tell me about ihsan. The messenger said that you worship God as if you could see Him. That you worship God as if you could see Him. For even if you do not see Him, He surely sees you. I mean, this is so profound. Sorry? Oh, okay, thank you very much. All right? So this hadith is so profound. Beauty is the splendor of truth. You worship God, you know God, live with God as if you could see Him, never forgetting that He sees you. He is closer to you than your jugular vein. And then what will that do? That brings you into the state of ihsan. That brings you into the most beautiful state of all. That brings you into a state which we can call moral perfection, spiritual perfection. And then you will be a recipient of beauty, and you will be a giver of beauty. This is all implicit in that. Okay? And then he said, the wonderful visitor, so tell me about the hour. Tell me about the hour of the coming of the day of judgment, the last day. The messenger said, the one who is asked, that is himself, is not more knowledgeable about this than the one asking, the amazing guest. And, this is a very important general principle about the last day. We're not here to talk about the last day, but there are legal wisdoms in the last day that are extremely important. But we begin by nobody knows what time it is. You cannot predict, even though the signs of the last day may appear, that this is what that is, and that the day of judgment is going to be tomorrow. The prophet says, the one who is asked himself, who would be most privy to that, does not have more knowledge about this than the one who is asking. So what about you and me? We have to be very careful about that, and people get into ridiculous positions. You remember when the year 2000 came, and everybody was in terror that our computers would fail and the internet would fail. And there are people saying the day of judgment is tomorrow. Sell your house, go off to the mountains. There are people who did that. And people who told them that, no, this is it. It's going to happen. May we not be fooled by these things. May we not be naive. So then the amazing guest said, so tell me about its sign. Tell me about its alama. And in some transmissions, tell me about its signs. The messenger said that the maiden give birth to her mistress, and that you see the barefoot, naked, and needy herdsmen of sheep vying with each other in building tall buildings. So that's amazing, amazing. Then he went away, the stranger. And I, that is the narrator, Umar, remained for a long time, not knowing who it was. A long time here could be 5 minutes, 30 minutes, a day, 2 days. Usually they say 3 days. It's about 3 days. Umar didn't know who that was. And then one day, the Prophet said, Umar, do you know who the person was asking the questions? I replied, God and his messenger know best. The Prophet said it was Gabriel. It was the angel Gabriel, who came to all of you to teach you your religion. He came to all of you, plural you. He came to you to teach you your deen. Now, this is the Fatiha of Hadith. This is the Sunnah. This is the great Hadith, absolutely authentic, that brings all the Sunnah together. And, we'll talk about it a little bit. This Hadith tells us so many things. First of all, as we'll see in a minute, it is a very late Hadith. In Hadith, you have Meccan Hadith and you have Medinan Hadith. Just as in the Quran, you have Meccan surahs and you have Medinan surahs. If you know about Hadith, for example, you may know that there are Hadith that talk about the foundations, the pillars of Islam, that don't mention pilgrimage. Okay, so why? This one does mention pilgrimage. Again, this is a sign of absolute historical authenticity, because all those hadith are before the peaceful conquest of Mecca. And therefore, pilgrimage was not possible, because Mecca and the rites of pilgrimage were in the hands of the pagans of Quraysh, who were at war with the Prophet ﷺ and with Islam. And so the Prophet, in his mercy as a prophet, speaks to the people according to what they can do right then, at that minute. And they can't make pilgrimage. They can't make Umrah. So this one, of course, has in it pilgrimage. If you can do it, if you can find a way there. But this is therefore after the conquest of Mecca, the peaceful conquest of Mecca. And now pilgrimage has become one of the pillars of the religion. Of course, in God's knowledge, it was always that way, but it will not be required of people until they can do it. And here we see that the deen, which is the entire religion, the religion in its entirety, it has these elements: Islam, Iman, and Ihsan. And this hadith also shows us the great status of the companions. Okay? Because of the fact that God honors them in this hadith with actually witnessing the angel Gabriel before them. And that is an immense honor, a huge honor. And not only are they able to see him and to hear him, and of course he's there manifested in human form, because angels do that. Angels are able to take human form. But here he comes to teach them their religion, which is an incredible statement of their standing, their integrity, their worth, and also now that they are the transmitters of this faith. They will very soon be the only ones who take it, because the Prophet will not be with them for very long now. And so this is a hadith that goes with the verse, which is in the Quran, in Surah Al-Ma'idah, verse number 3 of Surah number 5. اليوم أكملت لكم دينكم وأتممت عليكم نعمتي وَرَضِيتُ لَكُمُ الْإِسْلَامَ دِينًا. That this day have I perfected for you your deen, your religion. I've brought it to its fulfillment, its completion, and fulfilled my blessing upon you, and contented myself with Islam for you as a religion. So, this verse, like that hadith, they come from the same time. Ibn Ashur, he says that this verse was revealed when the Prophet was leaving Al-Hudaybiyah. Although he says it probably was sometime after that. Others say, and I think Ibn Ashur would agree with this, that it was revealed on the day of Arafah, in the farewell pilgrimage. Some say it was revealed to the Prophet on his way home from the farewell pilgrimage, that this day have I perfected for you your religion. And this hadith is saying the same thing. It's saying, I have perfected this faith for you now. Everything has been given to you. Everything has been transmitted to you. We just talk a little bit more about the hadith. And especially we try to keep our eyes on the phenomenon of beauty. And Nisa'i, who also has the transmission of this hadith in his collection, he states that the Prophet would sit among his companions, and a stranger, the gharib, would come and would not know which of them was the Prophet. And then he would begin to ask and ask and ask. And this is, of course, also extremely beautiful. We really have to, contemplate the incredible beauty of the Quran and of the Sunnah and of the Seerah. But isn't it amazing? The Prophet ﷺ was one of the greatest egalitarians the world ever saw. He was not a strong man. He was not a strong man, like a dominant, domineering person. His influence among his companions was because he was so beautiful. He was so kind. He was not rough ever. And the Prophet ﷺ could have eaten his full every day. And he could have worn the garments of kings, because gifts, whatever gifts there are, they always come to him. But as you know, he always gives them away. He will never keep anything more than he and his family need. And he will distribute everything, which is a model for us, and we must never forget it. But it means that they all dress about the same. So when a foreigner, an outsider comes to Medina, the Prophet is not distinguished by his dress, because he gives away everything he gets, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So whatever he was given, however beautiful it was, somebody else will have it. He may have something new. He's extremely beautiful, and also it shows that they were too. You become like the people whose company you keep. And this is an amazing reality and a great source of hope, because when we find good people, we want to hold on to them. We want to keep their company and be attached to them. Okay, and when we do that, we become like them. Little by little, we are transformed by them, just as people who keep the company of bad people, how can they not become bad? You know, you become like the people whose company you keep. So this also means that, you know, and we have other hadith that indicate this very clearly, that when people would come to the Prophet ﷺ, they could not distinguish him from his companions, because they're all beautiful. They're all radiant. They all have the same stamp of beauty, the splendor of truth. And so this becomes a problem, because especially towards the end of the prophetic mission, and that's where we are now, people are coming from everywhere. They want to see the Prophet. Arabs come from every part of Arabia. I have to see this man. And you have people coming from Persia, people coming from China, some of the amazing people of West Africa, like the Mandinkas, who are all Muslims, and they're an amazing people. The Mandinkas say our traditions go back over 10,000 years. Don't take that lightly. They do have tradition. Okay, but they say, we sent delegations to the Prophet. That's what they say. Maybe the historians don't record that, but they say, no, we did. And that's when our Islam began. And out of politeness and out of husnul dhan, we accept that. There's no reason why we shouldn't. One of the things that Arnold Toynbee, who's a great historian, shows is that, you know, who makes history? Who makes history? Minorities. History is always in the hands of minorities. And the majority, you know, even if it can vote, you know, it never can control. Okay? Minorities do that. And there are different types of minorities. In this country, for example, who owns the wealth? 50% of the population? 60%? 70%? Or 1%? Right? I mean, this is an amazingly wealthy country, but who controls 99% of that wealth? It's not 99% of the people. Okay? And those people constitute a minority, whether they can be visited in a neighborhood or not. And those minorities galvanize themselves. And they protect their privilege. They protect their power. That's what they do. And so you have different kinds of minorities. You have minorities that are domineering, that manipulate. You have minorities that are simply dominant, but not necessarily domineering. And then you have something that Toynbee calls the creative minority. And that's a nice word. The beautiful minority. And the prophetic minority of the Prophet ﷺ and his companions is the best example of that there is. So it is a very small group of people, numbering a few thousand, yes, but compared to the world, they're a drop in the sea. And they are very galvanized. They cohere. They love each other. إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِخْوَةٌ. Only the believers are brothers. Not the believers are only brothers. No. There are many things. Only the believers are brothers. Only the believers are sisters. Brotherhood and sisterhood are the essential qualities of the true believer. And if we don't have them, then we better check out our belief. Okay? So minorities are very important. And the creative minority, you know, which is the one that gives and the one that brings people together, and which is egalitarian. It is not dividing to conquer, because the domineering minority will divide the people to rule. And many of the problems that we have in the Muslim world today, they are for that reason. There are beneficiaries of the conflict. There are people who are maintaining control for their groups because of the conflict. Okay? In any case, what Toynbee says is that the domineering minorities and dominant minorities always alienate the people. They're essentially enemies of the people. Okay, they always alienate the people because they exploit them. They use them. They don't give them access to power and privilege. We had a group, and have a group in the United States called the 5%ers. Do you know why they're called that? And they are Islamic, proto-Islamic. They have different expressions that they've gone through. Inner city black. Okay, but their teaching was that 10% of the people are the bloodsuckers of the poor. That's what they said. Okay, I didn't say that. They said that. That's what they believed. We might say it's not 10%, it's 1%. Okay? And they might say that today. And they said 85% are deaf, dumb, and blind. Okay, because of the fact that they don't know what's going on. You know, they are manipulated. And 5% are teachers of the poor. And to me, that's really beautiful. I mean, whether the teachers of the poor are there or not, and whether they're 5% or not, we should be teachers of the poor. And we teach everybody, poor and rich. But this is the way the Prophet was, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, a teacher of the poor, a teacher of the downtrodden, who gives them the shirt off of his back. Literally, once the Prophet had 10 pieces of silver, little pieces of silver. And so he went to the market, and with 3 pieces of silver, he bought a new garment. And as soon as he came out from buying it, a man came up and said, "I have no garment." And so he gave it to him. And then he bought another one so now it's 6 dinars, right? He's got 4 left. And then when he came, he put that garment on, and he turned around, and there was a slave girl, a maiden, young girl, crying. Okay, and so he said, "Why are you crying?" And she said, "I was sent to the market to buy these things and lost my money. And I will get in trouble." You know, and so he said, "No, take these 4 dinars. And she still cried. Because she said, "I can buy all the things I need and I'll do that, but I'm going to still get punished because I lost my 4 dinars. And when they know that you gave me this, they're not going to be very happy." So he said, "Let me go with you. I'll take you home." So she gets all the things that she needs, and he walks her back to her clan, where she is a servant. And of course, do you think they don't know the Prophet's coming? I mean, the word is racing everywhere. The Prophet's coming, the Prophet's coming. He's coming to visit you. He's got your little girl, your maidservant with him. And so then the Prophet comes to the house where she works, and he said, "Assalamu alaikum." And they don't say anything. He said it again, "Assalamu alaikum." They don't say anything. Then he said it a 3rd time, "Assalamu alaikum." Then they say, "Wa alaikum assalam ya Rasulullah." "Peace be upon you, O Messenger of God." And he says, "Why didn't you answer the first time?" He said, "We just wanted the blessing of hearing your voice 3 times. Okay, and then he said, "I just came home to ask you to please be kind to this little girl." And they said, "You brought her to our house?" You know, she's free for the sake of God. They emancipated her, and emancipation, as you know, is an act of worship. And so she was set free, and the Prophet then said in this beautiful hadith, "What a blessed 10 pieces of silver. I bought 1 garment, which I gave away, which is a blessing. I kept another, And then with the other 4, this girl got everything she needed. Oh, she was set free. These are really beautiful, beautiful examples. But this is the way he was. And because he was this way, the whole community radiates that love. The whole community radiates that beauty. And the sign of a believer in Medina was Bishr and Bishara. It was that you show happiness and you smile, which is a sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and that you give nothing but good news. And how do you do that? You've got to keep your heart clean. Never speak ill of anyone unless you absolutely have to protect others. Don't backbite, don't slander, don't bear tales. And of course the Sahaba cared about that intensely. Okay, and then your heart is open. And then when you meet your brother or the sister meets her sister, you're happy. You're happy. And for them to meet your brother or sister with a frown, a critical spirit, bad opinion, was the sign of the hypocrite. This is very, very important. So it was a beautiful society based on principle, but based on the practice of those principles. And this is all ihsan, that we have a good opinion of each other, that we don't backbite each other. What is backbiting? To say lies about people? No, to say the truth. But the things that are not, that affect the honor of that person. If I know that a brother says insulting things to his mother or his father, do I have a right to tell you that? Absolutely not. That's backbiting. I have to protect his honor. And we had a very good khutbah in New York yesterday, and it was about this and other things, that, we have got to learn to protect each other's honor. And, our mosques must be bastions of that. We don't speak ill of each other. We tolerate each other. We bend over backwards for each other. And we do that in our houses and in our communities and elsewhere. And this is part of what leads to the transformation. But let's get back to Hadith Jibreel. So in Hadith Jibreel, you see again this incredible phenomenon that people come to Medina and they can't tell which of these beautiful people is the Prophet ﷺ. There's nothing that distinguishes him from them, although when people meet him, they say, "This is the most beautiful human being I have ever seen." Okay? So, in this transmission of An-Nasa'i, he states that the Prophet ﷺ would sit among his companions, and the stranger from out of town would come but would not know which of them was the Prophet. And then he would ask, which one is the Prophet? So they requested the Prophet ﷺ that he allow them to make for him a special majlis, a special place to sit, which would be a little bit off the ground, made of clay. It's not a big, a huge thing, but just a little bit high. They call that in Arabic a dukkan, which is a mastaba. And it's not a dukkan like a store. But they call that in the hadith, they say, we built him a dukkan from clay so that he could sit on it. And that's actually part of the details of the Hadith Jibreel. And then it says that one day we were sitting with the Prophet and he was on his majlis. So he was sitting up. This is something he'd never done before. See, so now he's sitting on that new majlis, and then he said, إِذْ أَقْبَلَ عَلَيْنَا رَجُلٌ أَحْسَنُ النَّاسِ وَجْهًا وَأَطْيَبُ النَّاسِ رِيحًا كَأَنَّ ثِيَابَهُ لَمْ يَمُسَّهَا دَنَسٌ حَتَّى سَلَّمَ فِي طَرَفِ الْبِسَاطِ. So he said that we built this, and the Prophet was sitting there. You imagine maybe the first time or the second time, until there came to us this man who was the most beautiful of people in terms of his face. His face was the most beautiful of human faces. And his fragrance was the most fragrant scent that people could have. And his clothes were beautiful, as if nothing dirty had ever touched them. And then he gave salams at the extent of the bisat, of the mat that was put out. So he doesn't just come and sit on the platform. He sits at a distance. فقال السلام عليك يا محمد. Peace be upon you, Muhammad. فرد عليه السلام. The Prophet said salams back to him. فقال أدنو يا محمد. قال أدنو. Shall I come nearer? Muhammad, he says, come nearer. فما زال يقول أدنو, time and time again, and the Prophet would say أدنو, until he came up and sat with him. This is why in the study of hadith, which is one of the most precious of all studies, historically accurate but beyond words, this shows you why. This is not in the hadith of Muslim, but this gives you the details that make that a much richer account. So Gabriel doesn't just come up and sit with the Prophet. First he sits over there. He says, should I come nearer? And the Prophet said, come nearer. And then he comes a little bit nearer. And he says again, should I come nearer? He says, come nearer. So, and he does that over and over again until finally he comes very near. And he sits in front of the Prophet ﷺ, and again he puts his knees on the Prophet's knees, and he puts his hands on the Prophet's thighs. And as we said before, that in the culture of the Arab means, I have a great need, and I want you to meet that need. And notice the references to beauty, the most beautiful face, the most beautiful smell. They say that the intense whiteness of the garments, we're just going to say this a little bit to get back to beauty as the splendor of truth. The intense whiteness of the garments, that is symbolically a sign of the purity of the deeds. And we are people who believe in symbolism. And symbolism is not arbitrary in our belief. Again, beauty is the splendor of truth. That's vertical reality, rooted in the nature of existence. So here, the whiteness of the garments, of course, means they are clean. It means he wasn't traveling. We talked about that before. But on another level, it also means that he is a man of good deeds. And it also indicates symbolically kamalun nuraniyah, the perfection of the light that is in this person. And in fact, that really is why he appears that way, because Gabriel never disobeys God for a moment, and everything that Gabriel does is filled with light. The intense blackness of the hair and the beard, which is specified in certain hadith, like the hadith of Ibn Hibban, also indicates kamal al-quwwat al-malakiyya. It indicates the perfection of angelic power, because the angels are extremely powerful, much more than you and I. I mean, we are nothing. So angels are always extremely powerful. And that's indicated here symbolically and actually in the blackness of the beard, the blackness of the hair. And then it shows us also that cleanliness is part of faith. All of us should, and being, and then also the word tulu' is used for Gabriel's coming. We say he appeared, but Tulu' is also what you use when you talk about the sun rising. The sun rises in the east. يَطْلَعُ. And so this also is a beautiful expression because it alerts our minds to the appearance of light. That the coming of Gabriel is like the appearance of the sun. And all of these are manifestations of beauty. Okay? Okay, so how are we doing now? It's time for a break? Yeah, so let's take a break now, and inshallah, when do we come back? Okay, so Salat al-Dhuhr is at what time?
12:30.
Okay, so what should we do now? Okay, I wouldn't mind. Inshallah, so we'll come back then after Dhuhr? Okay, inshallah. And, think about what we've said. We can ask questions, we can talk about this, and inshallah we'll proceed ahead. Bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. Wassalamu alaikum. The things that we say about human beings and about God use the same words. So in theology, we actually study about that very carefully. That why is there this overlap? And is it legitimate? And it is legitimate. This is what our theologians say. And in fact, it has deep meaning. But of course, one of those meanings is that these words don't mean the same thing when they refer to us and to God. God has knowledge and you have knowledge, but what is your knowledge like compared to His? God has perfect life, necessary life, and you are alive. But what is your life like compared to His? There's no comparison. But this is extremely important, and these are truths that are part of that great truth that is filled with profound metaphysical understanding that enables us to understand the nature of reality and really to enter the world of beauty. Now, we were talking about this incredible hadith of Jibreel, of the angel Gabriel. And let's just say a few more words about it and then we'll move on. As we mentioned, this hadith is a late hadith. And in fact, some of our great scholars have said that it is in the very last year of the Prophet's mission, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Just as that verse, Al-Yawma akmaltu lakum dinakum, this day have I perfected for your religion, comes in that year. And in fact, they'll say the same things basically about the hadith they say about the verse. That it was either before the farewell pilgrimage or after the farewell pilgrimage. But in this hadith, it was just before the end, what we call inqita' al-wahi wa istiqrar al-shara'. It was just before the passing of the Blessed Prophet ﷺ. And we call that the cutting off of revelation. This is a nice way to put it, because this is really what happens. We don't want to get involved in all the details about this, but with the passing of the Blessed Prophet, which is the biggest test our community faced, and any community, this is extremely important. Prophetic communities are attached to their prophets in ways that we cannot understand. And when the messenger or the prophet leaves, that is a huge test. But this is just before that passing, and we refer to that passing as inqita' al-wahi, when revelation was cut off. Because with that, there's no more revelation coming down from the angel Gabriel. And of course, the text of the Quran becomes fixed, and we call it istiqraru shara'. The law, the sharia, the path that leads to water and life, this prophetic law now becomes fixed. Its foundations are set. Nothing prophetic will be added to it after that point. Many of our imams, as we said, say that, this hadith has everything in it. It also, some note, involves in it the sunnah of the murid-shaykh relationship. Because Gabriel was the shaykh of the Prophet, and the Prophet is his murid. He takes from him, and the companions become the spiritual guides of their students, and their students become their disciples. So this really important relationship is part of the sunnah. It's a very important part, and you see it even in this beautiful hadith. Our scholars say all of the knowledges of the sharia, meaning all of the knowledges of Islam, they go back to this hadith. Mullah Ali al-Qari, he says about this hadith that it is called Ahadith, the mother of all hadith, the foundation of all hadith, because it shows, it includes sharia, the outward law, the path to water, tariqah, the path, which is the methodology of how we follow that law to get to what it means, and the haqiqah, which is the knowledge of ultimate realities that come with ihsan. Okay, and all of these go together, and all of these are explained very clearly in the hadith, but as Al-Qari says, bayanan ijmaliyan, in a overall way, just as Al-Fatiha explains the whole of the Quran and prophetic religion in an overall way. So this is very, very important, and one of the things that is noted is that in this hadith, it's very clear that the deen, the religion of Islam, it's got to have all three elements. It can't just be sharia. Okay, there has to be a path that takes you from the sharia to the realization of what the sharia is about, to haqiqah. There must be sharia, there must be tariqah. Here tariqah doesn't mean order, it means methodology. There must be a spiritual methodology of worship and discipline and humility, so that you arrive at the haqiqah, which is the profound understanding of the truth of what the Prophet brought us. Okay, this is extremely important. And these issues today have become extremely controversial in many parts of the Muslim Ummah. And they never were in the past. Ihsan, the spiritual path that leads to haqiqah, this was realized to be an absolute essential of Islam. And it is, and this hadith shows us that. One of the realities about ihsan is that it gives us an answer for everything. We talked of Iman, which is the creed. Iman enables us to think. When we learn Iman, we learn the basic aqidah, the creed. One of the things in doing that is we have to learn about intellect. And the fundamental role of intellect is to perceive first principles. Okay, first principles like, the greater cannot come from the lesser. You know, this cup must either be still or moving. It must either have a beginning or no beginning. Okay, those are intellect issues, issues of the intellect, and they are absolutely definitive. In fact, the intellect will even tell us anything that changes or moves must have a beginning. Anything that moves or changes must have a beginning. Pure intellect. And out of that we derive all sorts of knowledge. So in the traditional teaching of the creed, of the aqidah, we teach people how to think. How do we understand revelation, which is the chief source of knowledge? How do we understand intellect, which is absolutely essential? And it should be said here that although the modern West is extremely accomplished and extremely intelligent, it does not know intellect. It does not have intellect. And this is something that is very, very important, because in the development of what will become modernity, very influential thinkers nullify intellect. Immanuel Kant is one of the most significant of those. Immanuel Kant will essentially undercut the validity of all the intuitional certainties of intellect. And he, basically that will lead to the destruction of all metaphysics, which is also a very important part of modernity. So intellect is something today that we have to study. We have to learn. We have to even train ourselves in its use. And then, of course, experience. So these are the sources of knowledge. How do we use them? Then we learn about God, and we learn about the prophets, but in learning about God, we learn also about reality, the nature of reality. Okay? And this opens up the vista for us to understand the truth and to understand it profoundly and with conviction. That's Iman. It's very, very important, and it is regarded to be the first obligation of the deen that you master your aqidah profoundly. It can't just be that I believe this because I was told it was true. You have to understand it. You have to know it's true. That you know instinctively that God exists. Human beings know that instinctively. But what intellectual proof is there of that? There are many. The intellect always proves the existence of God. I'm talking here about real intellect. Okay? It always establishes the existence of the one whose being is necessary and who is totally unlike anything else. We say in our tradition, one of our great masters said, "Man la wujuda li dhatihi min dhatihi, فَوُجُودُهُ لَوْلَاهُ عَيْنُ الْمُحَالِ." That which has no existence of itself for itself, from its essence for its essence, its existence, were it not for God, is the very epitome of impossibility. Okay? I hope that's not too many words. Okay? That which has no existence of itself for itself. In other words, did you create yourself? Did your scarf create itself? Did this cup create itself? It cannot account for its being by itself. And all of these things taken together, even though some of them come before others, and some of them are related to others in what appears to us as a causal fashion, they all have the same problem. The finite must point to the infinite. The finite does point to the infinite. Okay? That which has no existence of itself for itself, its existence, and do you doubt the cup exists? No. But its existence, if it were not for God, who has necessary existence, is the very epitome of impossibility. Okay, this is Iman. This is very basic for us. Many of us don't study it today, and that's a disaster. And even if we do study it, we usually have to be tutored through many, many things, like intellect. How does it work? The greater cannot come from the lesser. That's regarded as a manifest truth throughout human civilization until today. And today, in fact, we're taught, no, the lesser does come. The greater does come from the lesser. But I'm sorry, that's impossible. Yet that needs a great deal of explanation, for us to get it today. And we have to give that explanation. Okay, so Iman is extremely important. Iman buttresses you. And the Aqidah is, it's intoxicating. It opens the mind. It enables you to be able to think, to be able to reflect. Okay, and but then when you come to Ihsan, which is the highest part of the deen, and as we see in this hadith, it is not something marginal. It is not something that's just a nice afterthought. It is the epitome of the religion. It is what Islam, practiced properly, and Iman, properly ingested, will lead to, that you worship God as if you could see Him. Okay, because this is what you're striving to do. This is what you're being taught to do. And when you do that, what happens to you? And this is why in the traditions that we have that come from Ihsan, we have explanations of reality that are absolutely startling. And that was the foundation of Islamic civilization. It's very, very important. And all of these elements have to be there. Again, why is there a fire? Why is there a garden? Jesus talks about those things. And Jesus shows that there's no doubt about them. Okay? And we believe in that with absolute certainty. Iman will simply establish to your intellect the understanding that these things are not irrational, that they are acceptable in the light of intellect, even though they are contrary to customary experience that we know. This is what the creed will do. Just as, for example, it will make you able to understand that a miracle is rational. It is not irrational, because God has control over all existence, and all existence is possible existence. And possible existence has infinite possibilities. So God can make any of those possibilities manifest, if He wills. And we have to get this. And we have to repeat it, and we have to do dhikr. But Moses has a staff. And his staff was probably not a very big staff. In fact, in Istanbul, in Topkapi, you have what is said to be Moses' staff. More than likely, the Ottoman sultans were given this gift by the rabbis of the children of Israel, because the Ottomans had extremely good relationships with the Jews. They were the protectors of the Jews. Muslims have always been the protectors of the Jews. And the Ottomans were also the protectors of the Christian church, especially the Orthodox church, because it was the main church in Orthodox realms. And the Sultan was the head of the Orthodox church, and they loved him. He reformed the church. He got rid of corruption in the church, and the Greek Orthodox Church will remain his most loyal supporters, for a long, long time. But, that staff of Moses, it's not very big. It's not very thick. It's not like you might have seen in Hollywood, right? And yet Moses casts the staff, and it turns into a serpent. A big snake that moves like a little snake. It moves very fast. Big snakes don't do that. But it moves like a little snake. And the magicians, they have ropes which they use through sorcery, and sorcery indicates always the death of religion. Sorcery killed Egyptian religion. It killed Babylonian religion. And when we have sorcery among ourselves, as we unfortunately do have, it means the religion is that some of our people are sick. They are sick because sorcery always is the death of certainty, the death of real belief. But they can cast these ropes and make them look like snakes. They know how to do that. They know how to delude the people. And then Moses casts his staff and it becomes a serpent, not an illusion. And the sorcerers can see that this is not magic. And then it eats their ropes, so they don't have any ropes left. And then Moses picks up the serpent and it turns back into the staff. Okay, is that irrational? Is that impossible? If you believe it is, then you don't have any reason. And you are a reductionist who has reduced the nature of reality to customary experience and nothing more. And that's a fundamental flaw of intellect. It's not the gift of intellect. Okay, so these things we learn in creed, and they are liberating, and they are true, and they are very important. But as you go higher, and you live that creed you believe, and you live the Sharia that you've been given, then God is likely to give you insights. And these come through amazing human beings in our tradition. And they can explain to us the whole pattern of reality. Their books are really precious. And if we were to take one of their books, let's say Sadruddin al-Qunawi, he is a master of the masters. And there's no issue in modern science that he could tell you where the metaphysical mistake is. Modern science has all kinds of conundrums. In the Big Bang Theory, in quantum mechanics, all of these are metaphysical problems. They're not problems with calculations and physics. They are because of the pseudo-metaphysics, which is at the basis of that science. And he would give you all the solutions. But if we were to read a page of Sadruddin al-Qunawi, God be pleased with him, and you're really good, we have a good teacher, it would take us about 3 weeks to read one page. That's how rich it is. Existence is good. Okay, this is one of those truths. Existence is good. Well, that sounds beautiful, but what in the world does it mean? And what about evil? You see, so this is not easy. This is not easy. Non-existence is evil. Again, these are what we call haqa'iq. These are ultimate realities. Non-existence is evil. Existence is good. How do we explain that? Well, I shouldn't even mention it because I don't understand it, and you might not either. Okay? But the religion has these truths in it. And the Prophet ﷺ taught us that. In the authentic hadith of Abu Hurairah says, I was given 2 camel loads of knowledge. And one of them I teach you, and the other one I don't. And one of them is the knowledge of action. And the other one is the knowledge of reality. And you need to have the knowledge of action. How do you be good? How do you do what's right? And the knowledge of the structure of reality, well, you can live without that. And in fact, you might not be able to get it right. And sometimes these two overlap, as in the famous hadith, which has many transmissions, that my servant does not approach me with anything more dear than what I have made obligatory of him. Right? So you can't draw to God with anything that he loves more than to pray 5 times a day. That's obligatory. Or to fast the fast of Ramadan. Nothing esoteric about that. And my servant does not continue to draw closer by voluntary acts of good until I love him or her. And when I love him, I become the eye with which he sees, the ear with which he hears, the tongue with which he speaks, the hand with which he grasps, the foot with which he walks. Okay? He does not ask me for anything but that I give him. Okay? Al-Hasan al-Anwar, may God be pleased with him, the father of Nafisa, Sayyid of Ahl al-Bayt, one of the lights of Egypt. God blessed Egypt with Al-Hasan al-Anwar. And he's one of the early generations in Egypt. And a peasant woman had a baby, and she had it out in the field, and a huge eagle came and took it away. And she ran to Al-Hasan al-Anwar, and she told him what had happened. And he raised his hands like this, and he prayed to God, and the angel flew back with the baby and put it at his feet. Okay, and you don't have to believe that if you don't want to. But, these are amazing people. Okay, and these are the people that are given these huge gifts, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. So, in any case, I forgot my chain of thought. What was it? Do you remember? We left that a long time ago. Are you still there? Okay, all right. So, in any case, forgive me for wandering. It's one of my biggest faults. Yeah, oh, thank you. Okay, you got it. Okay, good. She's paying more attention than you, okay? So, again, it's like, I become, that's it. See, Al-Hasan Anwar, he raised his hands like this, which we don't usually do, but the eagle took her baby. And so and then the angel turns around and brings the baby back. Okay? If he asks me, I will give him. These are the great awliya of Allah. Any believer is a wali of Allah, is a saint. But these are the big ones. I become the eye with which he sees, the ear with which he hears, the hand with which he grasps, the foot with which he walks. And in other transmissions, the tongue with which he speaks, the heart, So what does that mean? He becomes God? Well, we don't believe that. None of us believe that. But here in this hadith, and this happens in many other hadiths, by the way, you have an overlap of the two collections. The hadith gets in the collection of amal, of practice, because it's about the importance of practice. Do what is required of you, and see what's in store. You approach God, and then do more and more, sincerely and truthfully, and see what's in store. God will love you, and when he loves you, he will transform you. And I become the eyes with which he sees, the ears with which he hears, the hand with which he grasps, the foot with which he walks. So you don't think that he will know beauty? You don't think that he will create beauty? You don't think that he or she will unlock the secrets of beauty? They have the gifts. They have the gifts. They are the greatest treasure of all. And we have to respect them. And the hadith says, and whoever offends one of my awliya, I have declared war against. God says that. Whoever offends one of these people, he will declare war against. That's why we respect them. We respect Al-Hasan al-Anwar, Sayyid al-Nafisa, who is his blessed daughter, and others. Okay, we love these people. We respect them. And then God will love us. God loves you if you love the people that he loves. But these people are given the truths as an amana. And they teach that to people who are worthy of that amana. People who are humble. People who are virtuous. and people who also who can understand it, because many people can't. Can everyone in this room understand advanced physics or calculus? Some of you can, but some of us can't. And it's the same thing with these haqa'iq. You have some people who get them just like that. And you have others who love them, but they can't get them. Okay, but what's really important, and we see this in Hadith Jibreel, is that access to the world of ihsan is absolutely essential to the religion. Okay, and in Aqeedah we don't have an answer for everything. Aqeedah will tell you that the garden is true and that there's nothing irrational or impossible about it. And the fire is true. And there is nothing irrational or impossible about it. And Aqeedah won't go beyond that. But then even a child would ask, why do people go to hell forever? Okay, and who can answer that question? Al-Hasan al-Anwar can answer.
They are cosmic truths. Okay, and to understand that takes a lot of learning, because there are different steps you've got to get there. About your identity, for example, and the nature of human identity, and the relation of the human being to reality. Okay, and it's a beautiful pathway to go. In Islamic science, we had the best chemists, we had the best people in physics, we had the best people in mathematics and veterinary medicine and botany and everything else. Why would we study the world? You could ask why does Francis Bacon study the world? We will make nature reveal his secret. What an ugly, misogynistic statement. Francis Bacon. We will make nature reveal his secret. What is the Bacon? Well, you won't do that. He will be told. But Francis Bacon, he gets his science
Power. When we did science, to know about ourself. And Jabir ibn Hayyan, who was one of our earliest and greatest chemists, in one of his, is this good like this, just here? in one of his greatest works called Kitab al-Sab'in, the Book of 70, which is an amazing work on chemistry, written, what, almost 1,250 years ago. Jabir, he begins with the praise of God. He praises God, praises God, praises God. And then he talks about you and the purification of the self, and the necessity of the purification of the self. And then he warns the student that if you do not understand this or agree with this, you have no purpose in chemistry. No reason to study chemistry. Don't even do it. Why? Because chemistry is to discover about the self, to purify the self. Okay, that doesn't make much sense today. And you wouldn't get far with that in a modern chemistry department. But this is our dilemma, because the world hasn't changed. And that was based on a fundamental belief that we as Muslims had, and that many other people had, that man is the measure of all things. And that man, meaning also woman, is the microcosm, the little world. And that all that is out there, the birds, the plants, the stars, the oceans, that is the macrocosm. That is the big world. And that world is the blueprint of you. And you are the blueprint of it. And therefore you study that world in order to discover the secrets of yourself. Now, to me, that is absolutely profound. And the knowledge that comes from that is absolutely profound. And one of the things that Jabir does, and this is maybe some people would say even he's the imam in that, is he begins to root knowledge. And this is so important, because when you get the truth is principial. And therefore you take that principial truth and you begin to root all of the knowledge that you have in it. Jabir does that with chemistry. And he roots all of the realities of chemistry. And he's not an alchemist, he is a chemist. But he roots it in the fundamental principles of reality. We call that rooting knowledge. For example, in mathematics, there was Umar al-Khayyam, who was a great poet, Persian poet. He loved the Sufis. But Umar ibn al-Khayyam, he is one of the rooters of mathematics. This is one of the things he does. He loves mathematics. He breathes mathematics. But he roots it. That what are the universal principles in real mathematics? True numerology, that are also overlapping with chemistry, physics, astronomy, the Quran, the Hadith, and everything else. Because, again, truth, splendor is the beauty of truth. Truth is one organic, harmonious reality that brings everything together. So there is no contradiction between science and between religion, or between chemistry and between economics. You know, it's all there. And this is what religion's got to have. If you destroy your metaphysics, you destroy religion. And, you know, we're not here to talk about modernity. And we're not here to belittle anyone. But in the history of the West, the path to modernity, which really begins with people like Descartes, it is based in the destruction of traditional Christian metaphysics. And Descartes takes the giant step. Descartes is the one who says that reality is made up of two basic things. Things, which is an extension in space, okay, and then the mind that perceives it. Okay, this is the foundation of what is called Cartesian dualism, the nightmare of the West. Okay, and, we're not going to linger on this, but when Descartes does that, he has dealt a death blow to scholasticism. And, you know, scholasticism was the foundation of the medieval church. And, you know, scholasticism was profound. Don't think that it wasn't. We were taught that in school. You may not have been taught even what scholasticism is, but we were taught that the scholastics, they talked about how many angels could be on the head of a pin. Well, I'm sorry, they talked about things a lot more profound than that. And Descartes knew that when he made that definition of a thing, which is reductionist, then he had overturned the scholastic definition of a thing, because the scholastic definition of a thing, like ours, would never be like that. The thing has got to have shape, it's got to have form, it has symbolic value, it has quality. Why did you leave that all out? Well, because Descartes wants to do quantitative physics, mathematical quantitative physics, and of course that's a big thing. We can do a lot with it, but it's not going to ever tell us about reality, because we began with a false definition. And then the definition of the mind is totally reductionist. And after that, how do we bring the two worlds together? Even Descartes himself, who believed in God, in the end, even though he said, ergo cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am, it's like, give me a break. You don't know you exist? I mean, you need to see a psychiatrist. Right? It's like, this is where he starts. This is really, you know, it's laughable. Okay? But even at the end of his life, do I really exist? Does that world really exist? And in the end, before he dies, he died of a cold. Pray for me, I have a cold. Okay? He died of a cold. But before he died, Descartes went through a dark night of doubt in which he could not establish that that world exists. That's very serious. And in the end he said, I believe in God. God is merciful. I do not believe God would deceive me. And so then he affirmed that the world exists. This is what we call philosophy? I'm sorry. It's a very bad beginning. And anyway, let's get back to where we were. You have to have sound metaphysics. And this is not something that is arbitrary or marginal. And even for us today, as Muslims, it's like, you know, you've got to know about Descartes, and you've got to tell me whether you agree or don't, because I don't agree. I think this is one of the biggest mistakes in human intellectual history. And, you know, all the problems of quantum physics and things like that, these are from these metaphysical mistakes. And there is a contemporary Christian writer who is a Catholic. His name is Wolfgang Smith, who is also a metaphysician. He's a scholastic. And he is a master of mathematics and modern physics. And if you want, you can read some of his books, like The Quantum Enigma. You know, you may need some preparation to read Wolfgang Smith. But again, Wolfgang Smith and ourselves, we ought to be speaking the same language. I can relate very clearly to what he says, and I can only applaud him. You might not do that. You might not agree. And we don't agree with everything, because he takes a Catholic Christian point of view, and we disagree on certain things. But nevertheless, it's not that far away. But you've got to have metaphysics. And the Ihsan tradition will give you that. The Ihsan tradition will answer all your questions. The kind of questions that children ask and that we can't answer. Okay, now what happens when you rule that out? You don't even allow the people of Ihsan to speak. Many of the masters, I'm even hesitant to mention their names here for fear of a firecracker, you know? But this is the way it is in our communities. People who were regarded as the patron saints of Islam. You know, you can't even mention his name without somebody throwing a rock. Okay, this is really the end. This is the pits. And when we honored those people, and again, not everyone can read them. Not everyone is even allowed to read them. You have to be trained, to read them. You have to be tutored, and you have to worship a long time. Okay? But, when these people are there, then we have answers to everything. Okay? And let's say that you don't have an answer. So like, why is God good? And yet, he creates evil. Why is there heaven? Why is there hell? And there's so many other questions. Okay? Many of those questions today, if you ask them to Muslim scholars, so-called scholars, Allah bless them, they might tell you that's an evil question. I know of a young man in one of our Muslim countries, I won't say it, because this is not typical of that country, who asked his teacher in the mosque about evolution. And his teacher, who quite frankly didn't have any answer at all, slapped him in the face. I was told that personally. Okay? Like that's the way to bring up a good religious student? No, at all, not at all. And we know that in many of our Sunday schools and many of the communities we work in, that if you ask certain questions, you will be told to please be quiet. And you may even be said to be bad. You're not a good Muslim. You don't really believe. No, I want to believe. And I want to be a good Muslim. But I need to know why these things are true. And again, in the Ihsan tradition, we've got answers to that. Okay, now, who understands those answers? Okay, maybe you do. Our brother Elman, he has the capacity to understand that, but how do we teach them to the people? What would be the answer? Do you want to try? Beauty. Beauty. Song. Music. Muslims produce mostly, we had music for building. We had music for weddings. We had music for war. And we also had music to teach people realities. And that's usually what Sufi music, that's always what it's doing. And it does it in a beautiful way. And you don't really know what they're saying, but you say it 1,000 times. Like the Qawwali of India and Pakistan. What they are saying is profoundly true. Do you understand it? Probably not. But we love it. And you hear it again. And in India, for example, you have these beautiful songs that, again, they come from people like the Chishtis. And the songs would tell you, the songs you sing when you sew, the songs you sing when you weave, the songs you sing when you cook. And they're very beautiful, simple songs. Even the Hindus sang them because they're so beautiful. But always they have sprinkled in them a little salt. And that salt is about haqiqah, about the nature of reality. And you think that this simple peasant woman could sit down and explain to you that existence is good? No. But she can sing the song. And so we're going to talk about that because these ultimate truths, which are essential for the survival of the religion, they've got to be communicated by beauty, which is the splendor of truth. And that beauty then, as we said before, it thinks for you. It attracts you. It brings you there. And that was there even in our carpets, even in our mosques, our bridges we built, the cities we made. Okay, and so all of this enables these haqa'iq, which are bigger than life, in which only few men and women can actually understand discursively. Like what we're doing right now is discourse. Okay, that's why it's difficult. Okay, but only a few people can understand discourse, but they can all understand the poet. You know, they can all understand the song. They can relate to that. They can all see the incredible beauty of this mosque. I know a person, you know, many years ago, who was really in trouble. And in fact, he was on cocaine. And we got him away from the bad company. We tried, ultimately we were able to get him away from cocaine, to get him to a good company. But one of the things I did when I got him to a safe place was to just show him albums, what do we call them? You know, books full of pictures of mosques. And this was back in 1971. And he'd just say, wow, wow, wow. You know, but then after saying wow so many times, in a few weeks, he became a Muslim. And he got off drugs and everything. He became clean, you know, and he made a break for his life. Okay, but see, that's what he could see. He couldn't say anything more than wow. They're like, this is true. This is real. So this is very, very important. And, you know, this is why the whole thing about ihsan is not arbitrary. I know of a great man who is a great discursive thinker, one of the best of our times. And he speaks Persian, Sayyid Hussein Nasr. And he went, and he's a really good man. And he went to Pakistan. And he went to visit Bari Imam. Bari Imam, the great Imam. You know, he's a descendant of Shaykh Abdul Qadir al-Jilani. And so he stayed there at the maqam of Bari Imam for hours. He couldn't leave. For hours and hours. And then, you know, he got up to leave. He wanted to go back to his hotel. There's no one around. His hotel is a long way away in Lahore. And then, out of the dark, comes a coachman with one of these Pakistani carts with a horse. The man came up to him, and he said to the man spoke to him in Urdu, but he can't speak Urdu. But he spoke back in Persian, and the man understood. And he couldn't speak Persian, but he understood, and Urdu and Persian are very close languages anyway. And so he got in the cart, and the man took him back to his hotel, slowly, 45 minutes, and the whole time he recited to him in Persian, Rumi and Hafiz. Rumi is the master of beauty. And what does he use beauty for? To communicate the truths that could only be communicated that way. And in beautiful ways that make you laugh, that make you cry, you know, and that you can tell as a story to your children. And Hafiz is something else. I mean, Hafiz is, you know, I don't know what you can say about Hafiz. He's not Rumi, you know, but he is metaphysically subtle and sophisticated to the highest degree. Who's his equal? Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, the great German poet. He said, I found in Persia 7 poets that I can't even be called a poet when they're mentioned. And Hafiz was one, and Rumi was one. Okay, Sa'di was another. But, you know, he said, going home that night, he said when the driver came up, he had old shabby clothes. He said, if you bought them new in the market in Lahore, they would have cost you $1.50. He's a poor man, outwardly, a rich man inwardly. He said he recited Hafiz and Rumi to me the whole way home, and he said, I learned more about metaphysics in that 45 minutes than in all the years I sat with my teachers. Okay, that's a really good story, and it's a true story. But again, it brings home this absolutely essential element that this beauty is and has got to be an essential part of our culture. And this is what makes it work. Okay, so what happens to a person who doesn't have that? Or who's not allowed to have that? You ask the question that about God or about Satan or about heaven and hell, and you don't get an answer, and in fact you are reprimanded, then that person will respond, will react. And one of the ways that they are likely to react is to leave the faith. Okay? You don't have any answer for me. And you believe in something that you cannot explain, and I can do without that. So they leave the faith. Or maybe they leave it inwardly but not outwardly, and they become hypocrites. Like, sure, I don't want to displease my father, don't want to displease the imam, so I'll still go to the mosque, and maybe I can pray, maybe I won't do wudu, there's no need, and also I won't do anything offensive in my parents' presence, or hopefully where anyone can see, but if I'm by myself, then why not just have a good time? Okay, because ethics cannot hold you if the basis of those ethics is nothing but formalities. Okay, that never works. You've got to be trained to be ethical. And not only do you have to be trained, but you need to have a metaphysical foundation for that ethics. And then you see the cosmic meaning of truthfulness, of courage, of generosity. And you see also that I cannot be human and violate this. Okay? Then ethics becomes real. Then it becomes sincere. And then it becomes something that you will do no matter where you are, whether somebody's watching or not watching. Okay? This is absolutely essential. Religion without this is nothing. It's a dead letter. So that's what happens. A lot of people will leave the religion. Or they will become hypocrites, which is like leaving it without going out the door. And then there's the other response. And the other response is externalization. That person becomes an externalized Muslim. And what we mean by that is that they just hold to the forms, the do's and the don'ts. Islam becomes just the things we do, and we hold to that tightly because it's all we've got. And the externalized Muslim is the one who, by virtue of his or her externalization, has no access to the heart. Because the heart is the inward. The batin, the inward, it begins with the heart. And in fact, it is the heart. That's where it all takes place. So they don't have access to the heart. Because you cannot have access to that without these higher things. You couldn't even understand what the heart is without those higher things. In your chest is a piece of flesh, which if it is sound, everything else is sound, and if it is unsound, everything else is unsound. Okay, the Prophet here and in other hadith and in the Quran is speaking about the muscular heart. But how can the muscular heart have anything to do with spirit or thought or love? Well, it does. It does. But that is a metaphysical truth. And we can explain it to you. But it's metaphysical. And this comes out of the haqa'iq. And then you see also, and this is things that you'll find in our incredible tradition. That when I talk about the heart, the qalb, I'm also talking about the nafs, the psyche. And I'm also talking about the spirit, the ruh. And I'm also talking about the aql. And I'm also talking about your fingernails. Okay, can you make sense of that? Can you compute that? Well, with the right metaphysics, you can do it in a minute. When you know the organic connection of all these things, you can do it in a minute. And then you'll be able to begin to bring reality together. Okay? But the externalized Muslim he wouldn't even read that book. Okay, maybe he was even told that, that's bid'ah, because everything looks like bid'ah after that. You don't recognize anything in front of you. So that externalization is very dangerous. And in that externalization, it's very likely to produce fanaticism. Okay, and fanaticism always reflects lack of certainty. The fanatic, in his or her fanaticism, is declaring their certainty, but they're declaring it externally, and in such a way that to anyone who understands means you don't have it internally. And this is why the Prophet warned us about that. He warned us about excessiveness and other things, and that it's not good for your religion. It will overcome you. And in the end, you may be left with nothing. So the externalist, don't expect him to have good manners, because good manners requires introspection. It requires access to the heart. And don't expect him also to be at peace with the world around him, because he doesn't understand anything. All that he can see is that it's not the way it ought to be. And often the externalized Muslim, and this would be true also of similar people in other faiths. Fanatics have many things in common. And in the modern age, they do many of the same things. They love technology, for example. And often they love technology because it puts in their hands the power to destroy. And destruction is one of the things that makes a lot of sense to them, because everything is wrong. Nothing makes any sense. Okay? This is a plague. And people who are caught in that syndrome, and let's be very careful, I should be more careful, but especially when it becomes violent, especially when it turns on believers, begins to declare them non-believers, the Prophet ﷺ declared such people in Sahih Hadith to be kilabi ahl an-nar, the dogs of the people of the fire. Okay? They need more than this. You've got to get into your heart. You've got to know why we believe and what we believe. And if you don't have an answer to the question, then just say you don't know. But you should get the answers. And there are people that have them. And the traditional civilization of Islam, which is so alien to many Muslims today, that's what it was all about. It was about showing these truths to everyone and percolating them through the society in everything we had. Songs, even folk songs, stories, beautiful stories, maybe about a man and his horse. There's an incredible story that Nouri's father, Shams, tells about the old man and his horse. Okay, and I don't think we have time to tell that story now, but these are stories that everyone loves, and they're about profound truths, and they bring it home. I mean, stories are such a good example of that, that mechanism which in the hands of a good storyteller, man or woman, can make everything make sense, right? Because it takes these truths which otherwise would only be accessible to a very few minds and a very few hearts, and it makes them clear to everyone in a metaphorical way, in a story. And this is what our whole civilization was about. An incredibly beautiful, and I would say civilizations, because this is the gift that Muslims had for so long, that wherever we went, we benefited. We were not people who were allergic to other people. In fact, in the history of humankind, we were the international civilization. And we were the link that could easily extend out to everybody else. Chinese, Javanese, Indians, Hindus, Jains, Africans. Okay? We were good at that. You wouldn't believe that today, would you? Because today we're not good at it. We're not good at, in fact, we're usually very bad at it. And who do we blame? Ourselves. That's the one we need to blame. Because we have lost something. We've lost the master key. And we have to get that back. How are we doing? When are we going to take a break? Sorry? Okay, so that doesn't mean anything to me. You have to tell me.
Would you like to take a break?
Well, you tell me. I mean,
Maybe we can have some questions and answers around the break.
okay, so let's stop here for some questions and answers. And, then we take a break, all right? Yes.
Beautiful, very profound.
Astaghfirullah. I'm always asking myself, does it make any sense at all? And
One question I had was, in the Western culture where we grown up and all this, beauty is considered in the eyes of the beholder. We know that the eyes cannot see what the mind doesn't know. While we may project beauty in different ways, there are going to be people who may not see it as beauty.
well, this is a very important thing. Beauty is in the eyes of the beholder. And now that's something that can be interpreted our way or their way. Beauty is in the eyes of the beholder, is usually meant today to mean that beauty is subjective. And again, if we had more time, we could walk you through this. But, what the Western world, may God guide and bless the Western world, has done with beauty is very interesting. And it always goes through stages. That one of those things was to make beauty subjective. And no Westerner believed that in the past. Okay, they knew better than that. And, but then gradually the definitions of beauty will change. And especially in our time, this would be a major axiom, that beauty is subjective. And we would say that you can believe whatever you want, but it's not. It is objective. And you see, this is again one of the things about real beauty. It attracts. And it attracts everybody. It doesn't shock. And especially beauty in Islamic civilization was done in such a way that everywhere your eye looks, it will rest. Anything, a door, a window, the wall, that wherever your eye looks, it will rest. And we did that consciously. Okay? Now, the beautiful things last forever. And the Taj Mahal of India, which is one of the most beautiful expressions of truth in stone in the world. And again, ideological Muslims would be ready to stand up that this was haram and how they did not. I'm sorry, you don't understand anything about politics. You don't understand anything about how that state was working. But let's forget about all that. The Taj Mahal is absolutely beautiful. I've been there on the night of the full moon and the day before that. And, it accentuates the beauty of the terrain, the beauty of the heavens and the earth. And it was built by a Muslim ruler. And God forgive him if he overdid it. But the thing is, it is so beautiful that everyone in the world acknowledges its beauty. And it became the logo of India. And this is because it embodies objective beauty. We go to Spain every summer. And we have a Zawiya. Maybe you can come next year, which is a teaching session, that goes on. And, we'll take you to Granada. And there, if you haven't seen it before, you have Al Hamra, the great fortress, of Beni Ahmar in Granada. made of mud, clay. Again, typically Islamic architecture, tectonic to the nth degree. Our architecture was always tectonic. Tectonic means it fits the earth. It doesn't destroy the earth. We could talk about that, for hours. Perfectly tectonic. And it never blocks out the signs of God. The Taj Mahal's like that. You go there the night of the full moon, you won't believe it. You won't believe it. See, it's there to emphasize the beauty of the moon. It's there to emphasize the beauty of the water. Everything else, that's always what we will do, because architecture, which is the supreme form of art, architecture is to art like metaphysics is to knowledge. It's the architecture in Islam. It's got to bring out the signs of God in creation. And modern architecture always says, I am here. But it won't give you a resting point. And again, modern architects, many of them are very aware of the fact that we need to create beautiful things. And this is a beautiful building. But most modern architecture, there's no place to rest your eye. You cannot rest your eye. But the building is saying, I am here. Look at me. And one of the worst examples of that in the Muslim world today is the clock tower in Mecca, which most of you probably have seen. This is one of the most horrific architectural obscenities in history. And what does it say? I am here. This giant clock. We don't even need a clock in Mecca. We've got the Adhan, and it dwarfs the Kaaba. And what is that? But this is something that has a long tradition in secular architecture. Okay, so the Hamra of Granada. Have you ever been there? It's got so many guests coming there all year long that they have to set quotas or they will harm the place. They can't take as many visitors as want to come. And they come from Japan. They come from China. They come from every part of Europe. They come from the United States. They come from Africa, everywhere in the world. And does any of them ever say, this is ugly? They are in awe of it. So, beauty is the splendor of truth. And in fact, let's not talk about that anymore. But you see, it's like, it attracts. And one of the characteristics of this real beauty, which is the splendor of truth, is that it attracts everybody. Muslim, non-Muslim, hypocrite, believer, they all see it's beautiful. And again, it's thinking for you. It's thinking for you, and it's telling you messages that are very sweet. And maybe you can follow them all the way home. And it's amazing because so many things in our history are just beautiful beyond words, although we're destroying them day after day. Do you know St. Basil's Basilica in Moscow? Red Square? All of you've seen it. You might not know what I'm talking about. But St. Basil's is that amazing basilica in Moscow in Red Square that has the funky domes. They look like they ought to be in Disneyland. Okay? And they're really funny. They're beautiful. But the Russians love them. And so does the world. And St. Basil's became the logo of Russia under the Tsars and even under the Soviet Union. They put a big red star up there. Okay? And what is the background of St. Basil's Basilica? Those are the leftovers of a great mosque. And we don't say this to lament or to regret or to accuse, but those were the turrets and the minarets of the Jami' Mosque, the great mosque of Kazan, K-A-Z-A-N, in the central Volga. Because the Volga River, before the formation of the Russian Empire, was Tatar. And the Tatars are still there in Russia today. And the Tatars were Muslims. And the Tatars had been very powerful. They're called the Golden Horde and the White Horde. And they had beautiful little mosques, which, Ivan the Terrible didn't destroy, but they also had big Jami' mosques. And when he defeated them, then he destroyed those mosques. Yes? Let's come back to that in a minute. So we'll come back in 1 minute, okay? So St. Basil's, when Ivan the Terrible commanded that the great mosque of Kazan be destroyed, he also commanded that Muslim architects overlook the destruction of it and that they take as much of it as possible back to Moscow in bull carts, and that they oversee the building of his basilica that would be made from the same materials. So the basilica is a basilica. It's a Christian architectural form. It is not a mosque. That's a no-brainer. But all of those materials were taken from the mosque. And again, the point is, they are so beautiful, but at the same time, they hit a chord so profound in the Russian psyche that the Russians make that their logo. It becomes the symbol of Russia. So these are very important things, and they do show what we believe, that beauty is ontological. Beauty is metaphysical. And it's something that if you get it right, it will speak to everyone in the room, whoever they are, except for some of us who are externalized. And that's another amazing thing about this phenomenon of externalized Islam, and they're not all the same. And we don't mean to say they are, but some of them, the destruction of this beauty, they regard to be virtually an obligation. And that is so wrong, so absolutely wrong. And we've got to get the full teaching back, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Let me say one more thing about tectonic architecture. But before we do that, let's return to our sister. What was your statement about the Taj Mahal? Yeah, and this is the purpose of Islamic architecture, is to show you that God is great. I mean, I could give you pictures, but I don't have them ready. I just didn't have time to do that. But when you look at some of these great mosques, like let's say, for example, some of the great mosques of Istanbul, they are majestic beyond words. I mean, they really are. But they are not saying, I am here. They are saying, God is glorious. Okay? And this is very, very important. This is a very important difference. Let me say something about tectonic architecture. Not far from Rosales, which is where we go in Granada, there is a Moorish house. And it's very beautiful, built by the Muslims years and years ago, and it's on a hill. When I went there, I said, this must be a commander's house, because in that particular valley, they had lots of commanders, because it is the strategic zone where you have, the Crusaders on the other side of the mountain. So he needs to be able to watch the mountains in front of him, and he needs to be able to watch the valley behind him. And so he built, in this hill where he built the house, is perfectly situated for that. And, it's just a hill, rocks, okay, but when he built his house, and this is always what the Muslims in Spain and Portugal did, he didn't destroy anything. He made the house hug the hill. That's what we call tectonic. And so it just goes over the hill. And it has about 3 or 4 different levels. And the house is beautiful. You have to see it. I don't think you would ever disagree. And because he did it this way, also, he has an incredible view of the valley, incredible view of the mountains, perfect airflow, incredible light distribution in the house, and other things like that. And the house is like, it just made to fit the mountain. But that is the secret of its beauty. Let's get some more questions. Okay, so who put up their hand first over here? Was it you? Okay, let's go to you.
I just want to ask, what, maybe this is the rest of the talk, but like how do you go about reclaiming this aspect of our deed?
How do we go about what?
Reclaiming this aspect of our deed.
Reclaiming it?
Yeah, because
Well,
it's not
first of all, we've got to learn it. And we've got to understand it. And this is a fard kifaya in our time. This, in my belief, is a societal obligation in our time. And our scholars have many things to do. And many of them are very mundane. And they have to do those well. But there must be among us scholars of tahqiq, scholars that understand what all of this means, and who are able to understand how it relates to where we are. And they can't do that if they don't know how we got here. This is one of the worst things that has happened to the Muslim world, in my opinion. You're free to have your opinions. We adopted technology and modern sciences, especially engineering. That's the one that counts. It makes money. And medicine, that's the one that makes money, and many others. And I know there are engineers among you and physicians, and I ask you to forgive me. And I don't mean anything bad about you. But the thing is that all of those sciences have worldviews. They have metaphysics or pseudo-metaphysics. You were never taught that. In fact, you were probably taught this is the truth. Just as when we're taught modern physics or astronomy, it's like this is the truth. No, it's not the truth. Modern philosophy of science knows it's not the truth, but you won't be taught that. And you will be instructed and drilled year after year so that this becomes so deeply embedded in your mind, and it becomes the foundation of everything that you think, that you actually have imbibed a different metaphysics. And this is extremely destructive. And again, we have this amazing ability to live with it together, but there's great disharmony. And that's why we find in our community that we have problems that we should never have. With toleration, with, being beneficial to the society around us. Those are not traditional Muslim problems, ever. But they are today because of externalization. The externalization has that. Externalization means there is no understanding. There is no profound understanding. And people who have no understanding, especially when they think they really know what's right because they're engineers. And engineers know that problems are very simple, and you've got very simple solutions. Well, reality doesn't work that way. Bridges do. Bridges do, but there's some differences between bridges and reality. So we've got to learn these things in a very sophisticated way. Hassan Eaton, may Allah have mercy on him, is one of the stars in the galaxy. In his book, Islam and the Destiny of Man, one of the things he says is that the Muslim convert's got to be a galactic traveler. The Muslim convert must be a galactic traveler. Unfortunately, you have to be one too, even though you're not a convert, but you're sort of like a convert because, you've learned so many things here. And he said because there's like this galactic distance between where so many Muslims are today and where you happen to be. Coming out of the West, adopting the faith, and often when Muslims adopt the faith, we're not always very intelligent about that. And I wasn't either. I believed in the faith. It's true. But I didn't have profound understanding of it. And like many people, I made mistakes that I would be embarrassed of today. I was so literalist you wouldn't believe. But I had to be taught that, that let's sit down here at the table and read about usul al-fiqh a little bit, And that helped me. It's like, oh my God. So the convert doesn't always get it. Some of us, including myself, were very hard-headed, extremely hard-headed, but alhamdulillah, recipient to a little bit of teaching here and there. But, so we have to be these galactic travelers that know where the Muslims are today, how they are thinking, and some of the big problems that we have today. And, then know also what is over here in the West with this development of technology and science and all these other things. But we have to know that critically. And again, you're free to do whatever you want. You don't have to agree with me about Descartes or Kant or Francis Bacon or anything like that. But you should be able to understand the discourse. And you should be able to understand how critical this is. So this is a big job. And this is what we call tahqiq, the realization of this formal knowledge in profound terms. And always in the transmission of the tradition, you have naql, which is just the transmission of the texts, hopefully with ijazah, in which you learn how to read it properly. And if you have a good teacher, you learn to read between the lines also, because what is not said in the text is always more important than what is said. I hope that doesn't shock anyone. Even the Quran is like that. The Quran's silence is rich just as its speech is. And its speech comes out of silence. Qaf wal Quran al-Majid. Okay? Qaf wal Quran al-Majid. And then there is ellipsis. Bel. Okay? And in that ellipsis, there's something implied that's not said. That's silence. We call it hadf and taqdeer. We need to be able to relate to that. Then the Quran really makes meaning. Okay, so you have to be able to transmit the tradition. And our tradition is really rich, beyond words. Okay, but then you've got to be able to understand it. And you've got to be able to get it here, where it teaches us what we've got to know. Okay, this is really important, and then it begins to work again. Okay, so this is what we've got to do, and I myself would enjoy working towards this, because to me this is really beautiful. Give us understanding of the whole world, the West, the past, the Muslim world. We don't understand as a rule what we were and who we were and how our cities worked. How did we build our cities? How did we make them so beautiful? We've got to learn these things. Just as I don't remember if we said that before, but I believe that we did. But in the building of an Islamic city, what is priority? Well, maybe it's not number one, but one of the biggest priorities. Have we said that today? You've got to feed your people. You've got to feed your people. That's Sharia. That is the prophetic law. But you cannot make your people depend on the outside, because then they will be conquered. They will not be free. They will not be able to speak freely. They will be subservient to the people who import their food. Okay, and you might say, well, that's not a big issue. No, for us it is a big issue. The city needs to be self-sufficient. And our cities were. They're garden cities. And we did incredible permaculture. And then they're going to have areas around them, whether it's in Cairo or in Damascus or anywhere else, that can feed the whole city wonderfully. Most Muslim cities didn't have to import anything. I know of one city that they had to import 3 things. they just couldn't do for themselves. Coffee, needles, and razors. Now, that might make a capitalist toss in his sleep, right? That like, so what about markets? Well, we had the best markets in the world. But our markets were about basically qualitative goods. Things that were not essential, but were very beneficial and, very attractive. And then we would sell those because we were the biggest merchants going. If you want to talk about free market, oh, wow. We had free markets where everyone was free, even the poor. So let's get back to another question. Yes. Okay, I'm so sorry. You pray for me. Pray that God gives me the ability to answer questions simply, and not like to give a lecture on everything. Yes.
Okay, thank you so much for coming. You made me really famous.
Astaghfirullah.
May Allah grant you everything with highest paradise.
Ameen, ameen. And you and all of us, and may we all be there together.
Beauty is truth. Truth is so beautiful. God is so beautiful. And Islam is the sense of beautiful. Still bigger in America, Western part of the world. And on the television or whatever they are portraying it, it's the opposite. Now, if you
Yeah.
think if the prophet was here on this earth, how
Yeah.
would he be? How
Yeah, that's really true. That's really true. You say it's heartbreaking. I mean, this is the challenge of the time, that, we have been designated as the enemy. And that's been going on for a long time. It didn't begin on 9/11. It began even before that. And unfortunately, there are externalized Muslims who are very violent and who do things that are ugly in the eyes of the law and who declare other Muslims to be disbelievers. And whenever you find a Muslim who declares other Muslims to be disbelievers, then you are dealing with the Khawarij. And I know that many people, they don't like to hear that. But the Khawarij are the ones who took the verse, وَمَنْ لَمْ يَحْكُمْ بِمَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْكَافِرُونَ. And so therefore, if Ali, Imam Ali, peace be upon him, may Allah be pleased with him, if he doesn't have a ruling that is clearly in the Quran, they would declare him to be a kafir. وَالَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا بِرَبِّهِمْ يَعْدِلُونَ. And those who do kufr, they also establish equals with their Lord, so they're also mushrikun. Okay, and the Prophet warned us about those people. And Ibn Abbas, may Allah be pleased with him, he gave us the best example of how to speak to them as brothers and beautifully to bring them back into the fold. But no Sunni ever took the verse, وَمَنْ لَمْ يَحْكُمْ بِمَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْكَافِرُونَ as the basis of the takfir of entire societies. We could go through the tafsir tradition. The Salaf didn't do that. No one did that. And it's not a valid tafsir to do that. Okay? But that's what our people today do. For the last 80 years, this has been a fitna in the Muslim world. And with things like Daesh or ISIS, this has reached a crisis point. And what they do is ugly. And because they are takfiris, the Prophet describes such people as kilabu ahlan nar. They are the dogs of the people of the fire. And he said about the Khawarij, they will shoot through Islam and out of Islam like an arrow that's overshot, hits its prey and goes out, and it doesn't even have a trace of blood and it doesn't kill the prey. And he said also they die as non-Muslims. And he said about them also, sharrul khalqi wal khaliqa, this is sahih, and it's virtually mutawatir. They are the worst of creation and of khaliqa, which is animals. The worst of human beings. The worst of the people of the fire. And the worst of animals. They're worse than snakes and scorpions. Okay? Our Prophet taught us that. And why did he teach us that? To protect ourselves. Who are they killing? I just visited, a brother from Iraq who is one of the greatest members of our community. All of his family was killed in Mosul. Okay? Now, these things that are happening are just really the fitna of the time. And of course, Daesh, they serve the purposes of the media, to such a degree. And that's the image of Islam that the media wants, in my belief. Because this justifies an unjust foreign policy. This justifies intervention. Look what happened to Iraq. Look what has happened to Syria. It cannot be spoken. And who cares? I care, you care, nobody else does. Okay? And I gave a lecture at Princeton with slides, about Muslims in America before Columbus, ? Okay? Don't want to say too much about it if you don't see it or hear it, but we have surprising evidence, even maps from Java, that show that we knew the coast of Brazil long before the Spanish ever came. Okay, so we were here. We have other evidence. And you don't have to believe me on that. I don't expect you to believe me on that. We've been here a long time. And we probably had interrelations with the First Nations. Possibly even with the Iroquois, Cherokee, the Apache, and others, the Comanche. And again, I have to be really careful to even breathe that, because these things have to be worked out very scientifically and very carefully, otherwise they're just rejected as lunatic. But the thing is, we do belong here. We have been here as long as anyone but the oldest First Nations. And then we had a presentation that we gave at New York University on, was it Thursday? Which was called Muslims in Our American Past, 1587 till 1965. Again, I've got lots of evidence, beautiful photographs. We begin with Roanoke Colony, the so-called lost colony of Roanoke. We know, and I have an article on this, Turks, Moors, and Moriscos in early America. You can see it online if you like. But it is a historical fact that Drake, Sir Francis Drake, brought to that colony in the first year of its existence over 200 Muslim galley slaves that he had freed in the Caribbean. Okay? That is a historical fact. Now, what became of them? Well, we don't really know. Some of them were taken back. But we don't really know. But then we have some interesting things in our history, like a people called the Melungeons from Tennessee and Kentucky, who are not Native Americans. And they never have been. They don't have dances. They don't have Native American languages. They don't have legends or anything like that. They are a Mediterranean-looking people. And they were here before the British colonists came, in every case, the Melungeons. Okay, and they say they go back to Roanoke. And they called themselves Portuguese Moors. And you don't have to believe it. And they said that we were known as Mecca Indians. They're not Indians, but they would face Mecca and they would bow. So people called them Mecca Indians. Again, is that really true? Is that history? Well, we don't know for sure, but it certainly has an element of truth. And who is a Melungeon? Well, if you start counting, you won't stop. But you could begin with Abraham Lincoln, with Clark Gable, Elvis Presley, Tom Hanks. Those people have Melungeon roots. And who's more American than Abraham Lincoln? But he does look funny, doesn't he? And so does Clark Gable, and so does Elvis Presley. And then we went to New York City. And in New York City, I showed the picture of Humphrey Bogart, Jacqueline Kennedy, First Lady, Cornelius Vanderbilt, who is one of the great fathers of the Vanderbilt family, Eli Whitney. And I said, what do you think they have in common? So people say, well, Melungeons. They weren't Melungeons. They have, and also Anderson Cooper, you know, who is their ancestor, Murad Rais. They are all the descendants of their grandfather, great-great-great-grandfather, Murad Rais, who was the Dutch corsair, who was the president and chief admiral of the Muslim Republic of Saleh in Morocco. And he's well known. That's their grandfather. And he fought against the Spanish the entire period of the 80 Years' War of Dutch independence. And his son, Anthony van Saleh, who's one of his 5 sons, he came to New York as a Muslim, speaking Arabic, reciting the Quran in 1630. He was very wealthy. His father was one of the wealthiest people on earth. And he became one of the biggest landowners, proprietors, and creditors in Manhattan. And he had a big farm outside of Wall Street. Wall Street was not where the stock market was. The Dutch didn't have a stock market. It's where the wall was between the city and, you know, the rest of the island. And he was a defender of minorities, and he was swarthy. His mother was a dark woman, they say a Moorish woman. Her name was Margarita. And he defended minorities, and he was guilty of many crimes, such as keeping an English Quaker in his house. And the Church of Holland, the Dutch church, didn't like him, and they had big problems with him. And he was also very outspoken. He was very tall, very strong, and dark. And he defended the minorities, and they wanted him out of Manhattan, which he was a major landowner in. And so he was banished from Manhattan. At least he couldn't live there anymore. And so he said, well, what about Brooklyn? And so they let him go to Brooklyn. And he became one of the founders of Brooklyn. And he became, in a matter of years, one of the biggest landowners in Long Island. And again, he was regarded to be antisocial. And one of his common antisocial acts was that he would put loaded pistols in people's faces. That's pretty bad. But whose faces? Slave drivers. Slave drivers. So this is American history. And who's more American than, Humphrey Bogart or Anderson Cooper? And that's Anderson Cooper's grandfather. So we didn't come here yesterday. And then after that, and I'm not going to belabor this, but then we went to George Bethune English, who was valedictorian of Harvard University, who wrote a thesis on the origins of Christianity that gave him a major prize. I think it's called Boydon Prize. Boydon, I don't know how to pronounce it. So, English was from Boston. Yeah, right here, from Boston. And English wrote a book then about the origins of Christianity, which says that basically the origins are difficult to prove. And for me, he said, that's a problem. He was excommunicated from the church. But he was a very good friend of James Madison and John Adams and Thomas Jefferson. And James Madison appointed him to the Marines as a second lieutenant. The Marines in those days was the American Armed Forces, because the Marines was the Navy, the Army, the Coast Guard, all put together. And as a Marine captain, he sailed in the Mediterranean, and he was able to stop in Egypt. And he stopped in Egypt for a time, and in fact he even resigned from the Marines in Egypt because he wanted to stay there. And he studied Islam with Egyptian scholars and Arabic, and he became a Muslim. And he took the name Muhammad Effendi. And in those days, Egypt was under Ottoman rule. And Ottoman Turkish, was the ruling language of Egypt. And that's why, Egyptians will say things like, "Efendim." What do you mean? That's Turkish. Why are you speaking Turkish? Well, because that's what people spoke. If you want to talk to the ruler, you have to say "Efendim." And so he learned Turkish so well that the Turks couldn't believe he wasn't a Turk. And he was decorated by the Turks. He served Ismail Pasha. And James Madison respected him tremendously always. They had a really close friendship. And then President John Adams, after Madison, he sent George Bethune-English with a special letter to the Ottoman Sultan, stating explicitly that Muslims would be welcomed in America just like Christians. And they would have the same rights. And that's a common thing among the founding fathers. And before them, people like Roger Williams, the founder of Rhode Island, that Turks, meaning then Muslims, they're welcome here just like Jews. And he would say papists as well, Catholics. All these people should be welcome here. And George Bethune-English, I found only one image of him, which is a beautiful painting of him with his turban. And if you'd seen my presentation, you would have seen it. And then we can go on and on. So we haven't talked about the Africans yet. We haven't talked about who was the immigrants. We didn't talk about them. Many of you are immigrants or the children of immigrants. Who was the first Muslim immigrant we know of in the United States? Actually, there were people before him. But the famous first one comes over in 1856. And who is that? Hi Jolly. Hi Jolly, H-I, Jolly, J-O-L-L-Y. What was his name? Hajj Ali. Hajj Ali. But when he would tell people his name was Hajj Ali, they just said, "Hi Jolly." Hi Jolly, what a good name you've got. And Hi Jolly was brought here in 1856 by American Congress from Jordan because he was a camel master. And, Jefferson Davis, who was the Secretary of War at that time, and Franklin Pierce, who was the president, they came up with this screwball idea that after the Gadsden Purchase and after all this southwest territory of the United States came into the United States, which is desert and hot, that they've got to have a camel corps. And, the horse soldiers, the cavalry, will be trained in riding camels. Then they can defend the area, they can carry freight, and we'll finish in a minute, and, everything will be wonderful. So they need 77 camels, and they bring over Hi Jolly to take care of the camels, and probably others with him. And that's what he does. The thing is that the cavalry didn't like the camels. They didn't want to ride camels. They didn't want to be camel jockeys, right? So, and then also they found out that camels were really bad news because camels, I don't know why, they love donkeys and they love mules. And if you want to make camels happy, you just have to put a donkey with them. You'll never see a caravan of camels, I don't think, but there will always be a donkey there somewhere, or a mule. And for some reason, camels just really like that. So the one pack animal you did have in the Midwest, in the Southwest, were pack mules. And whenever the camels would see mules, they would go crazy. And they start, you can't hold them back. It's like, we have to see these mules. So they go running to the mules, and the mules see these giant camels come, and they bolt, and they run, and they throw off their, so they said, get rid of the camels. Okay? And then, of course, the Civil War came. And when the Civil War came, then everybody has to leave the Southwest. It's like, you've got another problem. Hi Jolly didn't leave, he stayed there. And he took care of his camels for the rest of his life. And he was decorated by the State Department. And his tomb is there in Quartzsite, Arizona. I visited it myself. And there you see that he was decorated by the Army, okay, and the State Department. And then he married a beautiful woman from Tucson. And I have a picture of that, you know. She's standing and he's sitting. Forgive me, he was a Jordanian Arab. And he's sitting like this, you know, and she's standing up, but she's a beautiful bride. And he had 2 children. You know, don't tell me that we are not part of this country. I wrote a book on Alexander Russell Webb, who's an amazing man, and it's really telling America's story through him. He was like a Muslim Forrest Gump, always in the wrong place at the wrong time. So you want to know about the Chicago fire? Well, was Webb there? Of course he was there. He was there. All right, so you can tell the Chicago fire story through Webb's eyes, because he'll always be in the unfortunate place, you know, and Jesse James, anything else, it's like he's going to report on Jesse James, you know. So it's an amazing story, but and this is one of the things, you know, that I noted. I wanted to tell this story because I wasn't interested in our image or anything like that. But the thing is that Webb is an American. He believed that Islam is completely compatible with America, and in fact, he believed that America cannot live up to its values without Islam. Because Webb was very concerned about white supremacy, racism, and he knew that Islam can take care of that problem. So, you know, and you're going to tell me these people are not Americans? But again, that's a message today which many people don't want to be heard. And I'm not conspiratorial. I don't have any complaints. But when the book came out, Oxford University Press in New York, it appeared in the very center of the New York Review of Books in the top left-hand corner. And I couldn't believe it. I mean, it's like, my God, my book is right there. Everybody will see it. I'd like that, but I didn't believe that I would score like that. It was right there in the middle of the New York Review of Books in the upper left-hand corner. Okay, and then the review came out the next week, and it was nowhere. And it never appeared again. And, you know, so I believe that it got where it was the first time because of my editor, because he loved the book. And he said, this is what America needs to hear. But I don't think that everybody at Oxford University Press in New York must have agreed. Because after that, it was silent. In fact, I went to the House of Lords in London, and I was given a special presentation in what's called the Moses Room, and many publishers came to that from England around the world. It was publicized, and you know, we were asking Oxford University Press to have many boxes of the book present because that's usually what publishers do. If they like the book, they'll buy boxes of it right there. And again, Oxford in England couldn't get the book. Otherwise, they would have provided it. But Oxford in New York, they are the ones that had the book, and they sent 2 boxes. 2 boxes. Whereas we could have easily distributed or sold as many boxes as you can imagine. So again, it's like, there's something going on here. And in my case, I don't have any issues. We just do what is right. We do the best we can do. But the way that media today, or certain elements in the media, tries to shape reality, and the way that they very subjectively take certain images and distort them and generalize them and never tell the full story either, and then exclude everything else, that is very problematic. And I would say, and you know, God forgive me if I'm wrong, and may I see the truth if I am, that this is imperial propaganda to justify certain foreign policies which are never discussed, you know, and to have images of Islam which are really ugly, that no human being could do anything but hate. And then that's you too, and that's me too, and that's all of us. And this is why we have got to do our work, and we have got to get that real image out there. And it is shocking in the United States how central we are to American history, how absolutely central we are. We could talk about that a lot. But that's a story that some people don't want to be told today. And inshallah, Allah give us tawfiq. We have Keith Ellison, who's a good congressman from Minnesota.
Yeah.
And, he took his oath of allegiance on Jefferson's Quran. And Jefferson really admired the Quran. And in fact, Jefferson, like Obama, was often accused by his opponents of being a Muslim. Interesting. But Jefferson knew about Islam. And so did Benjamin Franklin. Benjamin Franklin has statements about Islam and Islamic history that are just amazing. He knew, for example, that Muslims never mistreat prisoners of war. And he has beautiful statements about that. And he knew that from the life of Umar and from other things like that. So, but Keith Ellison, he says, if you're not at the table, you will be on the menu. And this is one of the truths of political life. I'm not a politician, and I would be the worst politician in the world if I was. But we have got to be doing our work. And you cannot just be sad and go into the corner and cry. Maybe you can, and maybe some of us can, but others have got to stand up and begin to do this work really intelligently and in a beautiful way. And inshallah, Allah will give us a beautiful way forward. Bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. So we're going to take a break now, okay? We'll see you after the break. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wasallam. I know you have many questions, and I apologize, for not being able to take them all and to answer them properly. There is one question that was raised that I want to talk about for a minute, and then we want to look at some other things. We did mention Cartesian dualism. And if you've not studied about that, I don't expect you to make any sense of it. This is the nightmare of Western intellectual history, especially the sciences. And Westerners are very aware of that. And they know they have to escape from it, but they don't know how. So in Cartesian dualism, you have this radical divide between things out there and the mind that perceives them. And just to clarify that, what do we have as an alternative to that? Well, in our traditional worldview, and this is the traditional worldview probably of everyone that ever was on earth, inherited, I would believe, from the prophets, is that you are the little world, and that is the big world. And even the modern concept of mind, M-I-N-D, is extremely problematic. But we would have had a huge issue with that, because your mind is the whole of you. Your heart, your spirit, even your fingernails. This is a very holistic view of the world. And in order to understand it, we need to be tutored through it and see what it means. But microcosm, macrocosm, you see, that's the traditional Islamic worldview. Al-alam al-kabir wal-alam al-saghir. And it's not arbitrary. But one of the things it means is that you are a blueprint of that world, and it is a blueprint of you. Again, where do we go with that? So what? Well, one of the things that means is that you know that world. You can know that world. And this is one of the reasons why when you read traditional Islamic literature, in certain fields, like the names of God, Asma'ullah al-Husna, and things like that, you will find this discussion which you may say, what in the world are they talking about? About such things as, what? Is the name the same as the thing named? Al-ism hal huwa al-musamma? And to the modern secular mind, that makes no sense. It's absurd. Okay, but that's because we live in a secular, Cartesian, dualist world. That's an extremely important proposition, because not only can you know the thing you know and name the thing so exactly that you get its essence, but we say in our tradition, and not everybody in our tradition says this, that that the knower and the known become one. So you are not just the brother of the tree, you can actually know the tree. And, we don't want to get into anything spooky, but it's like, you can truly relate to that tree. And, if you get into modern epistemologies, science, the science of cognition and other things like this, you know how rich this is, because it means that we can know the world. And therefore we relate to the world in a way that is real and objective. And this has incredible consequences for science, for psychology, for spirituality, and other things. We don't have a whole lot of time. Beauty is the splendor of truth. Beauty, therefore, is the communicator of truth. Beauty is the messenger of truth. Beauty is what makes the truth meaningful in our hearts. And we are supposed to be people of beauty, people of ihsan, people of jamal. But this was not just a spin-off of our civilization. It was almost like the mission of our civilization. And this is the way that it made itself so attractive to the whole world around it. So we have here several elements, but they're basically three: truth, virtue, and beauty. And let's talk about these a little bit. Truth is coherent. Truth is coherent. Okay, it brings everything together. This is one of its hallmarks. And one truth underlies all things. Of course, the truth of truth, haqqul haqq, is God himself, who is the creator of all that exists, and he creates it in the way that is most perfect. But nevertheless, there is one truth that underlies everything. And microcosm, macrocosm, which is for us a scientific principle, this is just the first complementarity that is manifested in that. The universe is a unified whole. In fact, the word means that, universe. And the whole world is one, just as a city ought to be one, and just as an animal is one, and just as a human being is one. Okay, so the fundamental purpose of Islam in intellectual history, especially in science, was to root all knowledge in a way that realized and manifested the unicity of truth and the unicity of nature, that it all fits together. And the supernatural, meaning by that the unseen, it has a natural aspect, because the natural world is a reflection of it. So also when you know this world out here that you can see, and you know how to understand it properly, and you have that gift to do that, then it also gives you this access to the perception of higher realities. Truth, like reality, is not invented. It is discovered. And that's why we refer to the discovery of truth by many beautiful words, but often we say unveiling. And you are a treasury of truth, because God created you with an amazing fitrah, an amazing natural self, filled with knowledge and wisdom. Okay? But you have to get access to that. And you can only do that with self-purification. Okay? But nevertheless, truth is what you discover. Truth is what is unveiled. And of course, you don't do that on your own. You have guides. It's all based in revelation. It's based in following the prophetic law. It's not arbitrary. We have standards to judge by so that we don't make colossal mistakes. Okay, so reality, too, is discovered and not invented. Today, people would say that reality is just whatever you want it to be. And we have idiots, like Stephen Hawking, criminals like Stephen Hawking, who will say that, you can have any world you want. You want a geocentric world? You can have it. You want a heliocentric world? You can have it. It's just a question of the mathematics and how elegant you want it to be or not. I mean, this is insanity. This is insanity. We could talk about that to a great extent. But, reality too is discovered. It is not invented. And the purpose of science and thought in Islam was really the rooting of knowledge. This is so important. Okay, virtue. Let's say a few words about virtue. Beauty and virtue, or goodness, are two faces of the same reality. One of them is essentially outward, beauty. The other of them is essentially inward, virtue. Goodness is internal beauty. Virtue is internal beauty. Beauty is external goodness. Very, very nice. This is all part of that paradigm, and this is something real. Okay? Ihsan, which is this huge goal that we all should have, to be muhsinun, people of beauty, people who live in beauty, people who produce beauty, people who are beautiful in the way they speak, the way they walk, the way they live with their family and their neighbors. It is virtue internalized. And virtue is at the root of ihsan. Okay? They say that the love of God is the essence of virtue. Virtue is also very closely related to justice. So they also would say that adl is part of that as well. Because justice is balance. And balance is harmony. Virtue comes from the just mean between two extremes. All right? Virtue is essential to intelligence. We said this, but let's repeat it because it's very important. In the modern secular world, we don't draw any connections at all necessarily between intelligence and virtue. And yet, in the traditional worldviews, our own and those of others, these two can't be separated. And of course, at institutions like Harvard and Yale or Columbia or these other old institutions, University of Chicago, where I went to school, it's be a little bit different because it's, from the 1890s. These schools, the old schools, they were all schools of virtue and theology. And what was that text that was on the place where we prayed Salat al-Jumu'ah in Columbia? The text that was up there, I don't remember, but it was about something like that. That you've got to have virtue in order to have truth. No, anyway, we'll come back to that because, okay, so we are made such that our intelligence has no effective value unless combined with virtuous character. And it's interesting that often in intellectual history, you get these people, which some people like to call genius. A genius is a very problematic matter. Okay, erected for students. Yeah, so listen, erected for the students. This building was erected for the students. So religion and learning may go hand in hand, and character grow with knowledge. That's the same thing. And that was Columbia University, how many years ago? These were standard truths. To think that you can teach students anything without teaching them how to be good human beings, virtuous human beings, was just absurd. And it is absurd. And, God bless Sheikh Hamza and this amazing accomplishment called Zaytuna. And may they have success beyond their dreams. But of course, Zaytuna, one of the main things it's doing is trying to make a university a university. And what was a university? First of all, a university brings everything together. It unifies everything. It is based on the belief in the universality of all things known. And the university was always a place of theology foremost. And to this day, it has to be that way. And our theology is spectacular. Believe me, Sheikh Hamza and I, gave a presentation back in 2003, The Attributes of God. Some of you have the CD. But, we talked about Islamic theology. We did it in a very brief way, not in an exhaustive way. But that's one of the things Sheikh Hamza was emphasizing, is that our theology is absolutely amazing. Believe me, it is. That aqidah, when it's taught with understanding, it gives us a key to everything. But it means nothing without virtuous character. But when we talk about this word genius, and we could talk about that, but I think there are better things to talk about. The West in the 19th century in particular has a cult of genius. And these geniuses with their hair all over the place and absent-minded and everything, these become like the prophets of modernity. And interestingly, of course, these people are not all the same. They're very different. But you'll find that many of them were not very nice people. In fact, they're often very unbalanced people. But they do certain things, that lead to inventions, and then the people laud them, and they follow them. But often these so-called geniuses, they have basically one breakthrough. And they have this incredible insight that they will elaborate, maybe they have it when they're 15 or 16, and they elaborate it for years. Einstein's an example of that. And he gets special relativity, general relativity, and then basically there's nothing after that. There's nothing after that. And often they become actually very mediocre. And why is that? Well, everyone has their own answers, but some of our scholars would say that's because they did not complement their intelligence with virtue. And therefore the gift fades. Had they done that thing, which is to complement their gift with virtue, then they would have produced all their lives. So these things have to go together. Let's say a few things about beauty. Beauty is content, okay? It's not just some kind of outward balance. The content of beauty is the richness of possibilities in God's cosmic generosity. The richness that underlies beauty is the richness of the possibilities of God's cosmic generosity in the way that he creates and in the fact that all of these things link together. Beauty has the mark of harmony. Just like that's also part of your soul when you're virtuous, that you are harmonious. You are balanced. It's essential to good health. And harmony is the reflection of the principial unity that underlies the manifest world. This correspondence is also the basis of symbolism. And perhaps we don't say much about that, but for us in our tradition, symbols are real. They are not arbitrary. And, we could go into some of the great symbolic. Of course, the Quran is symbolic. It's full of symbols. Hadith is symbolic. It's full of symbols. But we never believe symbols to be metaphors. We believe symbols to have a relation to the things they symbolize, which is stronger than the thing itself. And symbols are rooted up there, in the vertical plane. Of course, in modern psychology, Freud will say, symbols are just illusions that are coming from, the subconscious of the lower self. Well, and even the West doesn't believe that today. Jung, who succeeds Freud and who opposed Freud, Jung has a different view, but still it's basically, this has got to be psychic. Why? Because there's nothing else that exists. There's just things out there and the mind that perceives them. Again, you see the dualism? And that's why Jung, who can't see, why do people have the same symbols? Why do they have the same symbols? What does a square mean? Well, a square has a personality, by the way. And a square has a numerical value, by the way. But the square is the earth. And the square can be many other things. But the square is the earth. For us, it's the earth. And for the Chinese, it's the earth. When you write the earth in Chinese, it's square. And when you write China, it's square with a mark through the middle because it's Middle Earth. Okay? And these are not arbitrary things. And what is a circle? Well, circles are many things. And circles have personalities. They have numerical values. They are extremely meaningful. They have centers. Square also has a center. Okay? But the circle is the heavens. And again, that's not just us. That's all kinds of traditions. And they didn't learn it from each other. It's like they just got it because they had something here and something here. And that's why one of the great objectives in Islamic architecture is to put the circle on the square. Of course, in doing that, you get a dome. And one of the great things about a dome is that you don't have to have lots of pillars. If you've been to these old Muslim mosques like Ibn Tulun in Cairo, or you go to the great mosque in Cordoba, pillars, 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 and it's beautiful. And I have no problem with that. But then again, Muslims would say, if only we could kind of get some open space. But you can't do that if you can't put a circle on a square. And architecturally, that is extremely difficult to do, just as it is geometrically. Okay, but to put the circle on the square is symbolically to unite heaven and earth. And therefore, when we do it in our architecture, we actually do it with that in mind. And again, how many people love the dome, but they don't necessarily perceive anything like what we just said. Yet that is intrinsic to it. So All things are linked together. And that's what lies at the reality of number and symbol. And letters. All things correspond to each other. In this correspondence, they work together
Assalamu alaikum.
to
Just
produce
want you to know that
universal
we
and
learn
total
from
harmony.
because of
And this
going on
universal
upstairs.
and total harmony
So just be patient
reflects
for
the
5
unity of
minutes.
God, the oneness of God. And this correspondence that we just talked about, that is the basis in reality of symbolism. Again, the modern human being as a rule, is totally illiterate when it comes to symbolism. They can't get it. You'd have to walk them through it like a baby. And this is again because of what our destruction of metaphysics has done to us. Okay? As we said before, beauty has ontological roots. It is there in reality. And I gave the illustration of how really beautiful things attract people. They attract all people, whether they're Muslims or not. Just like Al-Hamra, it attracts the Japanese, the Chinese, atheists, Marxists, everybody. But beauty has ontological roots. We talked about that a lot. But then there are other things that indicate it, like a snowflake. Snowflakes are beautiful. Flowers suggest a whole world. And beauty liberates. Beauty frees you. Ugliness imprisons. As we said, beauty is outward virtue. Beauty is not the same as truth. Of course, we can say that beauty is truth. And one of our sisters did say that. But technically, beauty and truth are not the same. They're different. But they go together. I mean, if you do not have beauty, you do not have truth. So they are measures of each other. Beauty is not the same as truth, but it enables you to grasp truth through a series of perceptions that lead to each other, as opposed to discursive thought, which also has its rule. And again, traditional Muslims were extremely sophisticated at this. Our architects were masters, and one of the things I saw this summer that was really astounding, we talked about the golden ratio. You know what the golden ratio is? The golden portion? It's a big deal. That's your face, by the way. It's all the golden ratio. And the golden ratio is that proportion which human beings have generally believed to be maximum beauty. And it can be, we can give you the mathematical value of it, which is an irrational number, doesn't end. The Parthenon is an incredible manifestation of the golden portion. Generally speaking, in the golden portion, you have a thing, and when you divide it, then that third that is divided, I'm probably going to get this wrong, its relation to the other portion is going to be the same as that portion's relation to the whole. Okay? I don't know if that made sense to anybody. Didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I know what I'm talking about, so I know it should have made sense. But it's very amazing. And you see the golden portion in throughout nature. Leaves. And it has numerical values. Like 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8. And you'll find the petals of flowers are like that. There'll be 3, 5, 8. The relationship of your nose to your face and your eyes to that and this to that. It's all golden ratio. It's all golden ratio. But we were talking about that. And Sheikh Jihad Brown gave some incredible, he just rolled off all these examples of the golden ratio in your face, in your body, your arms. But then, one of the brothers who's a student of art and architecture, he showed me, in certain Ottoman mosques, how some of the people making the designs and the calligraphy were doing it with the golden ratio in mind, and then they're putting all sorts of other things in there about letters, the names of God, and he would just say that some of these are just masterpieces. And again, who's doing the building of the mosque? The guilds, the asnaf. Okay, so that particular calligraphy. Okay, so that particular calligraphy, that he was seeing that was brilliant. He said, you can see how the other guilds, they see how great what they did was, and they try to beat it. They try to equal it, but they usually can't do it. So I was told that it's time to go home. He didn't say that, but it is actually time for us to go home. It's been an honor to be with you. I thank you for your patience. And, it's a brief visit. Hopefully Allah will enable us to get together more. And I will be giving a presentation on this topic, inshallah, at RAS in Canada, in that teaching retreat. And I'll try to do my homework better and to get it down a little bit tighter and to move a little bit faster. But so we will have Beauty is the Splendor of Truth in Canada, and maybe we get a little bit further. Okay, we didn't get very far today. But what's your question?
I just want to know, what was the name of the group that you said was Spain and you?
Sorry?
Didn't you say there was a group, like a travel group that goes through the mosque? I can tell you. Oh, you can tell me that?
Okay, Hisham will tell you about that. But we're not a travel group. You got to pay your own ticket. Okay? Yeah, Bismillah. Tafadal. Oh, it is time. I forgot. Oh, my goodness.
So
اللهم وفقنا لما تحبه وترضى وجعلنا من عبيدك السعداء وأمتنا على كلمة الهدى علمنا ما ينفعنا ووفقنا للعمل بما علمتنا به واجعل ما نحن فيه خالصا مخلصا لوجهك الكريم يا رب العالمين. اللهم اجعل تجمعنا هذا تجمعا مرحوما وتفرقنا بعده تفرقا معصوما لا شقيا منا ولا محروما. آمين آمين آمين. May you all be well.